This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
All right, what's going on, WSTers? Huss here with you for another week, another month of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily, officially into the Winnipeg Jets off-season. And well, it was quite an interesting weekend down at Canada Life Centre. Of course, there was some action on the ice, which we'll get to with the Manitoba Moose in the playoffs. But we did hear the end of the year media availabilities from a number of members of the Winnipeg Jets. Head coach Rick Bowness, and then on Sunday, general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff. And I don't think I am exaggerating when I say these were as highly anticipated media briefings as we've had in a long, long time. I mean, last year at the end of the season, kind of game by game as the team missed the playoffs, we heard a lot from a number of players. And you know, the final day was noteworthy mainly for what Mark Scheifele said and what he didn't say. But this weekend was weird in a number of ways. You know, obviously there was a lot of anticipation to going into what everyone believes is such a crucial offseason, and one that could potentially and likely will involve a lot of change with the team and the organization. You wouldn't really have known that from being there and listening to everything that we got from, well, maybe more so the players, certainly more than the head coach and the general manager. I mean, as far as newsworthy things coming out of it, I mean, the one thing that we heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff was that Rick Bowness is the head coach going forward. And I think, you know, basically leaked to Elliot Friedman on Saturday night in advance of Kevin Cheveldayoff speaking that no changes are expected to the management situation for the Winnipeg Jets. So essentially that means Chevy's the guy and he will be going forward. But listen, it left a lot. It maybe created more questions than it did answers from everything that happened, especially from the GM, not so much the head coach. And then we'll get into the players. So I know I can see in the chat already there is plenty of comments going back and forth from everyone. Please keep on firing up your takes in the Winnipeg Sports Talk chat if you're with us on YouTube. And if you are listening on the podcast and do want to give us your say as we get into tomorrow's show, you can always fire us a tweet on Twitter at Sports Talk WPG, and make sure that you're following us over there as well as on all the other social channels at Sports Talk WPG. So this is the way today's show is going to work, a little bit different than normal. You know, often we'll have at least a couple guests. There is so much audio from the weekend that we want to play. Certainly not all of it. We're going to do that over the course of the next hour or so. Listen to Blake Wheeler, Connor Hellebuyck in particular, and some of the other players. Then we'll hear Rick Bowness, and then we'll play some of Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments before we bring in Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press to get his reaction to what we've heard and what this really means for this team going forward. I certainly have my own opinions. We'll get to those as well. But I do want to get Remis in here, who has been doing a yeoman's job for the last 2 days, going through and cutting up all of this audio. To give us an idea, we normally would maybe have 9 or 10 clips. We've got well over 100 right now. We won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll try to play some of the most important ones if you missed it, and the key ones to discuss here on the program before we bring in Jeff Hamilton. Listen, just before we get Remo in here, obviously we can't do it without the sponsors each and every day. We want to thank them, especially Baseball season is back. Winnipeg Goldeyes back on board with us, and Assiniboia Downs, who also open up their live racing season a little bit later in May. Our friends at Modern Man Barbershops, Aquatech, Manitoba Battery, Canadian Club, Vita Health, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Princess Auto, Consolidated Supply, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, Little Brown Jug, Aikens Lake, and of course our friends over at Breezy Bend and Coolbet.com. Tomorrow, big lock shop, second round begins tomorrow night, and Dusty and I'll hit all those 4 series tomorrow on the Lock Shop at noon. Make sure you're following me on Twitter or at Lock Shop Bets for the latest from the Lock Shop. All right, let's get Remis in here because there was a lot of things that happened on the ice, and in the world of sports on the weekend that we do want to touch on before we get to the Winnipeg Jets. But this show will be dominated by reaction and fallout to the weekend that ended officially the Winnipeg Jets season. Remo, what's going on? Are you going crazy from listening to all this audio yet?
Yeah, I mean, I did listen to all of the Kevin Cheveldayoff 40 minutes and grabbed relevant clips from there. And, it was pretty entertaining, being at the arena on Saturday. You and I went down and saw firsthand, a lot different being there than watching on the video. It was a bit of a, I don't know, did have a kind of like end of the road feeling for a couple guys, and we are anticipating big changes, but it was the end of the season media availability. So I don't know if it was as much like fireworks as last season, where Mark Scheifele made some big proclamations, wants to see where this is going, and the Paul Stastny thing was. I think people had kind of learned their lesson. No one was really taking a stand on any topic at all, including disclosing their own injuries. No one wanted to reveal.
Well,
so
they took a stand on one topic.
Oh, you're
and
right.
That's what
Sorry.
Rick Bowness had to say after the game. And if anybody thought that the players were going to show up and sort of own it and say, well, you know what? I understand that he was pissed off, but that was really on us for playing such a poor game with our season on the line. I understand why you felt that way. There was absolutely none of that. I mean, for an organization and a group that had been talking about increased accountability, I can't say there was very much of that. And ironically, Reem, the biggest pushback that we heard from the Winnipeg Jets or have seen from the Winnipeg Jets over the last week was to what their head coach had to say. It certainly had nothing to do with what happened on the ice as their season was hanging in the balance in Game 5.
Yeah, pushback was really the word of the weekend. It was Rick Bowness using the word pushback to describe his team's lack of it in Game 5 against Vegas. And then it was the pushback the Jets players had against those comments. But then we also saw pushback on the ice from the Florida Panthers, who were down 3-1 to the President's Trophy Boston Bruins. Everyone counted them out. They certainly pushed back their way to Game 7 overtime win. And the Seattle Kraken, who were able to push back against the defending Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. Seattle without their top scorer, who was the victim of a dirty hit from Cale Makar, and also without Andre Burakovsky, one of their top free agent signings. So there's definitely a lot of pushback. I think it might be the more common word here. We've had malaise. We've had, I forget what other stuff that we've...
malaise is so 2018.
Yeah.
This is... pushback is the 2023 buzzword on WST. And as I said, I'll be honest, I was borderline stunned from on Saturday when the players were speaking. And again, we'll play some of these quotes, but I mean, Blake Wheeler coming out and saying he didn't appreciate or like the way Rick Bowness handled that. The one thing that was absolutely lacking in pretty much everyone that spoke when asked about it was any acknowledgement of why it was said. And again, this has been Bones' first year, and it was sort of, Bones came out afterwards, and again, we'll play this, and he didn't really walk it back. I mean, he did say, and I think this was a reaction to what we heard from the players, that, maybe he didn't, he regretted his choice of words, saying that he was disgusted, but he stood by what he said, and he should have. My big takeaway out of this, Remo, and if this wasn't the case already, it certainly is right now. I think the majority of Jet fans, and correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but Bones is the people's champ. I mean, he's the one guy that has been giving us the straight goods. And he did again for the most part of the weekend, although trying to do it maybe in a little bit of a softer and gentler tone, considering what we've heard from the players. But I appreciate more what Bowness had to say, because when you look around everybody else in that room, there really didn't seem to be a lot of frank truths being said about what did and what didn't happen with this hockey club this year. And then as far as when we get to Kevin Cheveldayoff, I said last week, the one thing that Chevy can't do is stand up and drop a extended word salad on all of us. And I hate to say it, that is pretty much what happened. I mean, I understand that he's not going to roll out and show up at the end of the season meeting and say, well, great to see you all. We're trading this guy. This guy's done. We're probably moving on with him. I mean, that's not the way any NHL general manager, handles things. But there wasn't even an acknowledgement that this was that it was an incredibly crucial offseason for this club, that there were going to be changes. I mean, I certainly believe that there will be, but I think it was a missed opportunity to connect with the fan base and giving the fans at least a bit of a bone that they're working on some things. Things are going to be different because they have to be. Like, I don't see what the downside in saying that would have been. But listen, kept the cards very, very close to the chest. We'll play some of that a little bit later on. But I'm not sure it helped them, at least in the court of public opinion, with with what was said and frankly what wasn't said right now. Because I mean, I am still of the opinion that even if they don't want to do this, they're going to be forced into this based on the contract situations of a number of key players. Even if they don't, as I do, believe that some significant changes need to be made to the core of this hockey club to avoid, seasons like we just had, where you see what the team is capable of, you see them completely get away from it for a long time, and then at the most important time of the season, when everything is on the line, completely shutting it down the way the team did. Or maybe that's unfair, but I mean, basically their poorest game in the most important moment. And as I said, coming out of the game, this is not the first time that's happened. Completely wilted in Game 4 against Montreal. And as I mentioned, coming out of Game 5, it had a real St. Louis Game 6 2019 feel about it. We're moving on to it. So there's a whole lot to get to today on the program. But Reem, before we get to all the clips, you mentioned those two NHL games last night, and man, what a shocking upset. I'll tell you one thing. It was a great day for former Jet head coaches, because Paul Maurice is now on to the second round, completing a stunning comeback upset of a historically good Boston Bruins team. And I got to tell you, I think there's a lot of people around here feeling pretty darn good for Dave Lowry, considering what he was put through last year as Dave Hackstall, and the Seattle Kraken upset in Game 7 on the road the Colorado Avalanche. To get back to pushback, we saw a lot of it from both of those teams, and what incredible upsets they were.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest. The Florida one, I took Florida in 7 on my bracket, so I was giving myself the Barry Horowitz there. But the one team I said before the playoffs has zero chance of advancing was the Seattle Kraken. I was like, there is no way they're getting past the defending Stanley Cup champion Avalanche. They don't have the top players. Then they lost Jared McCann. It just didn't seem to go well. And credit to them, they pulled it out in 7. And one thing, I don't want to hear any more about the Jets' home playoff record, because it seems like around the NHL, Hustler, every team at home, like Colorado losing at home, Game 7, Boston losing Game 7 overtime at home, the Lightning eliminated at home by the Maple Leafs. Like, enough. I think
road teams are 14 games up on home teams far in the playoffs.
They had the overtime stats, home road. They said in the I think it was like 11-3 now since Florida, when road teams winning in overtime. So enough about home road, because the Kings also eliminated at home. I mean, I think we've just seen this playoffs that it doesn't matter if you're home or road. Anyone can win, and maybe it isn't as much of an advantage as it has been in the past.
Yeah, a lot of pushback from those road teams, a lot of pushback from the teams that ended up winning. And hey, I mean, again, we're having a little bit of fun. Maybe we'll make some pushback T-shirts for WST heading into next season. Hell, maybe that'll be the motto of the 23-24 Winnipeg Jets year. It's time to push back. You can give them some ideas for that, but it was an incredible first round. And obviously around here, very disappointing that the Jets were the first ones to bow out. Exponentially worse for the way that they bowed out in that fifth game, especially considering the way that things started. But overall for the NHL, it was an incredible weekend. It was an incredible first round. The Leafs are moving on. The Leafs and Oilers right now are the favorites to meet in the Stanley Cup final. And as much as that would probably trigger a lot of people around here, it probably would be, it'd be awesome for hockey in Canada as much as it would drive me personally nuts. And I don't even think it would be bad in the States, because I think what we would see is some of the best young players in the league. If you've got Connor McDavid, that's a big win. I mean, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, but particularly Matthews, would be big. There's still a lot of work to go, and it probably doesn't go down that way just because of what we've seen so far. But I'll tell you what, the execs at TSN and Sportsnet are probably over the moon right now, knowing that those two teams are playing. And listen, the Avs are out. We'll have a new Stanley Cup champion, the best team all year and the best team in a long time, the Boston Bruins, out right now. But we do have one Game 7 to find out who is going to win, who will be playing the Carolina Hurricanes. That, of course, will go tonight in Newark, New Jersey, between the Jersey Devils and the New York Rangers. And then round 2 is going to get ready tomorrow. As I mentioned just at the beginning, we'll have a big round 2 preview tomorrow in the Lock Shop. But Reem, before we get to the Winnipeg Jets, let's hit the local teams that are in the playoffs right now. And first up, what a weekend for the Winnipeg Ice. 2 big convincing wins over the Saskatoon Blades out at the Ice Cave on Friday and Saturday. They are now in Saskatoon preparing for games 3 and 4 tomorrow night and Wednesday. And then, presuming Saskatoon can get a win and get the series back to Winnipeg, we will have another game at the Ice Cave coming up on the weekend for the Ice. But heck of a way to start things off. And, it wasn't that easy for them against a Moose Jaw team that's given them a hard time throughout the year. But man, they seem to be ready to go for the Saskatoon Blades, who, of course, coming, in back-to-back comeback wins in 7 games. Maybe they didn't have a lot left for the powerhouse Ice. Nevertheless, for people following the Ice here in Winnipeg, a hell of a good start to round number 3 to get them within 2 wins of the WHL Championship Series.
Yeah, pretty incredible. The Ice, I know they had that disappointing year last year, really come back. They've learned from last year's failures and moved on and have a shot here now advancing to the WHL Championship, 2 more wins and possibly even a Memorial Cup. So we're definitely keeping an eye here on what's going on with the Winnipeg Ice.
Now, as far as the Manitoba Moose went, they had 2 home playoff games on Friday and Sunday. I was at the Friday game, and I mean, this one in some ways was sort of over before it started. I was talking about how strange it was that the Winnipeg Jets brought both of the Moose goalies out to Vegas and were flying back on Friday, the same day that they were playing game number 1. Well, they gave the start to Evan Cormier. It did not go well for Cormier. He let in 3 early goals and got the hook. And Arvid Holm, who was on a plane probably about 4 or 5 hours earlier in the day, was put into the net. It ended up 6-2. Milwaukee was definitely the better team in that game. And listen, Milwaukee, it was crazy watching the game in the arena, remembering the games against the Nashville Predators at the end of the year between the Jets and the Preds. Like, half of the Preds team is back on the Admirals. Evangelista, who was, very prominent, playing a big role for Nashville. He's back there right now. DiGiuseppe, I could go down the list. But this is a real strong Milwaukee team with all the players that they got back. So, going into yesterday, this team, it wasn't technically a must-win, but it really was. In a best-of-5 series where games 3, 4, and 5 are all on the road, you couldn't lose your first 2 at home. And it looked that way. Evangelista put them up late in the third period to 2-1, but it was Cole Meyer who tied the game with less than a minute left. And then a guy that has been kicking ass at the AHL level ever since he got sent down, Jansen Harkins, once again being the difference maker. Hark with the OT winner, and the Manitoba Moose salvage a split and now know what they have to do hitting the road this week, and that's win 2 of 3 in Milwaukee on the road against a good team. But 1-1's a hell of a lot better than being down 0-2.
Oh, yeah, and what a call you tweeted out. Daniel Fink, was he fired up or what in the booth? Pretty incredible. I think he's got to check on his voice here for the next one, but I agree. It wasn't technically a must-win. I think people are getting on us of our overuse of the term must-win. But, I mean, when you play
it was a can't lose.
Yeah, it was definitely can't lose, and you don't want to go down 0-2 to 3 straight on the road. So shout out to the Moose, and helps when you have your goalie situation sorted out, as you said. Oskari Salminen getting the start there, stopping 30 of 32. And you look at the lineup here. Jansen Harkins scoring, Declan Chisholm 2 assists, Toninato on the board as well. So some of their top guys contributing in big spots.
Yeah, I mean, they're up against a team that's got a lot of help from their parent club. But, I mean, a gutsy win by the Moose, and that's something that I think they've that has earmarked their play throughout the year. So nice to see them get that win, and fingers crossed they'll be able to keep that ice plant going at Canada Life Center for a little while longer to see if the Moose can get past Milwaukee and continue on with their season. One other bit of news just before we get to the Jets audio from the weekend. And it certainly is in stark contrast to what's happening here in Winnipeg. But 1 year removed from a Jack Adams Award as the Coach of the Year, after a disappointing season for the Calgary Flames. First, it was general manager Brad Treleving, who is moving on. And now today, Reem, it is official. Daryl Sutter, no longer head coach of the Calgary Flames. And, there's a lot of talk. And one of the things that Chevy mentioned, last year, the player meetings took all day. This year, they were quite quick. I mean, they kept on talking about how great the room is and, how pleased guys are to be playing with each other or whatever. It certainly gave the impetus or the impression, I should say, that everyone in that room is on the same page. Obviously, that wasn't the case in Calgary because it's been reported that they were lengthy meetings with the players. And it sounds like maybe some of the agents got involved as well and said, frankly, they're not interested in playing for Daryl Sutter anymore. And you know what they say? It's easier to change one coach than 20 players. And that is what's happening now in Calgary. So Maloney's in as the new GM, and there will be a new coach in Calgary after such a wild offseason player-wise last year. This year, it's on the other side in management and their head coach with the Flames.
Yeah, when they hired him, I was questioning, is this the guy you want to bring in? And then they had that awesome season last year. Like, Daryl Sutter, he's the man. He's the best coach. And then he had an extension that was set to kick in July 1, but it was pretty clear this year that it wasn't working out with the new players they brought in. Jonathan Huberdeau, the biggest drop-off in point totals in NHL history, over 100 point. Was he have 110, 2 years ago, and this past year he had 55, I think it was. I mean, pretty crazy drop-off. He had, Nazem Kadri had said, they weren't really getting along. And when the two guys who you signed to long-term deals aren't getting along with your coach, might be time to make a change. And too unfortunate for Daryl Sutter, but I do think this will help them move forward. It's hard to see. Like, if Calgary, what do they have, 14 overtime losses, and they missed the playoffs by, 2-3 points?
Yeah.
So amazing if, maybe they would have made it. Maybe they don't make the change. But I think it was pretty clear they were not getting along there behind the scenes in Calgary. Even if they made the playoffs, I don't know if this doesn't happen anyways.
The final straw was throwing Nick Ritchie out for that shootout with their season hanging in the balance right now for Daryl Sutter. But don't feel too bad about Sutter. He's got to cut a couple rings, and I believe 4.2 times 2, I believe he's got 8.4 million reasons to not be having any bake sales for him going forward. He'll just get back to the farm, keep on working, and I'm sure spend some time talking to his accountant about all the money coming his way. All right, we're going to get to the Winnipeg Jets and everything that we heard from the club over the weekend. But as I mentioned, Goldeye season is here, everyone. May means the boys of summer are back. And I have to tell you, I was out at those Blue Jay games in Toronto a couple weeks ago, and one of the things that I was thinking with the beautiful weather and the Dome open was just how excited I am to get back to the ballpark. And camp is starting this week on the 3rd. Team's going to work out on the 3rd and 4th, and then hit the road for preseason games and the opening of the season, May 11th in Gary, of course, where Greg Taggart was the longtime manager. There's 4 Canadians on the roster. Max Murphy, the 2022 Player of the Year, is back. Home opener is on May 19th versus Lake County as the Fish open up their 30th season here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. For more information on Goldeye season tickets, group outings, 10-game mini packs, get on over to the team's official website at goldeyes.com and definitely make a plan to be there for the home opener on May 19th. Our friends at Modern Man Barbershops now have 8 Winnipeg locations, but we got a big event happening on Sunday. The Modern Man Pembina is hosting a grand opening event on Sunday, May 7th from 12 to 5 p.m. Receive a haircut for $9 with proceeds to Cancer Care Manitoba Foundation. Plus, the first 100 people get free lunch from the Jeepney food truck. Visit their Instagram at Modern Man Barbershops for more. And if you need to hit a Modern Man, there's 8 locations in Winnipeg. You can book your look and make your reservation online at modernmanbarber.com. And again, more information on the grand opening at Modern Man Barbershops on Instagram. Speaking of baseball, summer, how about outdoors? How about, making the most of this summer? And Aquatech is here to help you can make 2023 the year you take the plunge. Visit aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. Their team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. And while you're thinking about improvements to the property, whole home renovations start with Aquatech as well. With thousands of renos as their foundation, let Aquatech upgrade any space in your home. Aquatech is ready to make your reno dreams a reality. Learn more about design, pricing, and financing options at aqua-tech.ca. And hey, May's here. We can feel the spring and summer coming. Jets are done, but our friends at Manitoba Battery are ready for the offseason as well with their celebrations of their 10th birthday, with more and more sales getting ready for summer. And right now they're blowing out golf cart batteries. For those of you who enjoy our beautiful Manitoba courses or rip around and tour from friend to friend at your summer getaway. 6-volt golf cart batteries are $167 right now. 8-volt golf cart batteries, $177. And those prices include free delivery anywhere within the city limits. And when you return your cores to Manitoba Battery, you'll receive another $17.50 off what's already the lowest price in Manitoba for golf cart batteries. Get them now so you can be ready for May long weekend and summer fun. Sale is on now until May 6th. Pop by and see them at 1026 Logan Avenue. And for more information, go to manitobabattery.com. And of course, hey, big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club. Bomber season just a couple weeks away for training camp as well, and it won't be long before we're enjoying that great CC and Ginger at IG Field. Of course, Canadian Club, proud sponsor and official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You can pick up Canadian Club and CC and Ginger at your local Manitoba liquor marts, and look for Canadian Club and Ginger in 473 milliliter cans at your local Manitoba liquor mart. All right, Remo, let's start this off. And I guess we'll explain to folks that we began the weekend 9 a.m. on Saturday morning with a number of players. And first up, it was Blake Wheeler and Connor Hellebuyck, who, for my money, were probably the most interesting ones. Whether you liked or didn't like what they were actually saying, there was something to be said. And we may as well start right at the top with this one. Here's what Blake Wheeler, longtime Jet, former captain, had to say about what his opinion of this season overall.
That was humbling for sure. A lot of changes and circumstances, and so yeah, there was a lot of growth in areas and A lot I'm proud of. Obviously, missing the playoffs last year and then making it this year. I think that was a step in the right direction. But obviously disappointing that we didn't get to where we wanted to go.
All right, so there's Blake Wheeler. Now, you knew it wasn't going to take very long for Bones' post-game comments to be brought up, and Blake Wheeler was really the first member of the Winnipeg Jets that addressed them. Here is what Wheels thought about Bones' post-game comments after Game 5.
I thought that Rick had an opportunity to address us as a team, and because now we have to answer that question, right? And I think, he could have been honest with us. We could have had those discussions behind closed doors. So I didn't agree with how he handled himself after that game. I know that our performance in Game 5 wasn't up to a standard that we would have liked it to have been, and there's disappointment in that. I know how my teammates and I prepare for every game. This is the most important thing in a lot of, our lives. Not my life, but a lot of my teammates don't have kids, so this is the most important thing in their life. And, the preparation and what we do in between games is nothing short of, being all in on trying to win that game. And unfortunately, we didn't show up in a manner that we would have liked to. So there's, like I said before, there is room for disappointment in that, but I didn't like how he handled after that game.
Yeah, so there you go. And listen, I'll give Blake credit for coming out and saying it. Maybe some other guys kind of couched it, but listen, I'm looking at the chat right now, and I mean, there's a lot of boo-hoos and basically the exact reaction that I was sort of thinking. I'm like, are you serious? This is about the way Rick handled himself after the game? One of the things, and Cheveldayoff spoke about this, Remo, after, I guess on Sunday, and they sort of chalked this up to Rick being a really emotional guy and telling you exactly how he feels. It's exactly what this team and this group, I think, has needed a lot more of, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, I think we saw in the second half of the season that there's a lot of guys on this Winnipeg Jet team that can't hack it, that can't handle that sort of blunt honesty. And I think it affected players in the second half of the season. It certainly affected the overall team's performance, that when this team really got challenged by whether it be opponents or by their head coach, they folded. So I can tell you it's pretty clear looking and listening to the fan base that there's not a lot of sympathy for guys that may have had their feelings hurt or whatever by the way the coach, handled the Game 5 loss. Because to be honest, and this goes back to Rick Bowness really echoing so many things that the fans are saying themselves. How in the world, with your season on the line, do you come out with a performance like that? And as I say, I'm not really sure if this was just a defiant player saying what they had to say, or maybe they're just used to having their own way and not being challenged like that. But there's a pretty clear disconnect between what the coach had to say and how the players reacted to it. And I'd love to know behind the scenes. I mean, Rick came out, and we'll hear from him. He didn't walk anything back, but he did sort of say, well, maybe his choice of words were, a little extreme or harsh or whatever. Is there anyone that doesn't think that this team needed a harsh reality check a number of times this season? Not me.
It was interesting to hear them say they were surprised to hear him say that, because he had called them out previously in the season after the Flyers loss at home and after the San Jose game, where he questioned what said, these guys think they're giving 100%, they're dreaming. So for a lot of guys to come out and be like, yeah, we didn't know that he felt this, we wish that he would have brought it up. It seems like it was brought up a number of times, and maybe they chose to ignore it?
I took it this way. Like, well, and listen, Blake did acknowledge that they didn't come out with a game that they liked, that they thought that the situation deserved. But at the same time, it's almost like, well, you're not supposed to say anything like that in the media. You're not supposed to be. For the longest time, the lack of accountability on this team has, I think, just spiraled into doing the same thing over and over again. Again, this isn't the first time this team's had an unbelievably terrible performance in a game where they were facing elimination. We talked about the Montreal series, and that game in 6 in St. Louis still stands out to me 5 years after the fact. I don't know. Maybe this is almost sort of the players in 2023, although I'm not sure that that's the case around the league. But man, it seems like there's some thin skin in that dressing room. And if anything, I think Rick Bowness's public approval rating went like this over the course of the last few days. Not because of the way the team played, certainly not, but the way he had passion and honesty. And unfortunately, and you think back to the start of the season, he was talking about how quiet the bench was at times. And I mean, they're looking for that passion and energy of this club. They had none of it in game number 5. And it is sort of funny that the pushback that we've been talking about only came in front of a microphone on Saturday after the head coach blew up the way he did.
No, I thought you were going to say the pushback was from the team's former head coach, who was able to get pushback from his Florida Panthers down 3-1, and you don't see the Seattle Kraken saying, oh, we're down our top scorer, we're playing against the defending Cup champions, and they still brought it in. I mean, it's definitely a trend. The team's record in elimination games hasn't been good. Most notably, the no-show in St. Louis, when they were only down 3-2, and against Montreal in the game 4 as well, after, they kind of faltered in that series after Mark Scheifele was suspended. So it was definitely disappointing to see that happen for another time where they kind of, although if you ask the players' house, it wasn't the Jets, it was they just had their worst game, and Vegas actually had their best game of the series. That was another thing that came out of it. I mean, they didn't really point as to why maybe Vegas had their best game, but that was one of the comments coming out of the players as well on Saturday.
Yeah, listen, here's one more from Blake before we get to Connor Hellebuyck. And I can't remember who asked this question, so I apologize because it was a good one. I think that there was certainly an air, the possibility that Blake Wheeler wouldn't be back next season. And he was asked for a question essentially, if this is the case, how would he like to be remembered, and what does he think his legacy will be here in Winnipeg?
Oh, this is from Jeff. Yes,
this is from 13. Okay, from Hammer.
I mean, I gave it everything I had. You know what I mean? And I hope that that's good enough. You know what I mean? There wasn't a day I took off. So that's I guess that's the best you can do.
Yeah. And it did. Listen, I don't want to say that there was a complete air of finality to it, because as we heard from the general manager, there's a lot of things that need to be discussed and evaluated. So, I mean, nothing is guaranteed. And I think as opposed to the other players, the thing about Wheeler is that at his age, with his ticket, as we saw last summer, that's not an easy contract to move. So who knows about that, whether that will be. But I can't dispute that, he is a guy that I think we've always appreciated his level of effort. But it was an interesting comment and a really interesting long pause after he was asked the question. Actually, let's do one more with Wheeler, because this was another comment from I think that in a lot of ways encapsulated some of the things that the organization was saying, but also some of the players that have been here for a while as parts of this core. This is Wheeler on how the last 5 years have lived up to expectations following signing his contract after the highs of the 2018 season.
If 2018 didn't happen, I wouldn't have re-signed here, The only reason I did was I believed we had a chance to win, I thought 2018, when we got to the Final Four, I thought we were the best team. It was an opportunity we let slip. So, yeah, I mean, I've dedicated my career to this place because I believe that, you know, we had the pieces to win. So from that standpoint, you know, yeah, it's disappointing to know that that didn't come to fruition. But at the same time, you know, I think what Connor said is pretty accurate, you know, for keeping things in perspective. We've made the playoffs, you know, I think every year but one. So there's an opportunity there that you know, we haven't realized the full potential of, but in that same span of time, there's a lot of teams that haven't made the playoffs once. You know, there's a lot of teams that haven't won playoff rounds, you know. So it's kind of, there's a little bit of both, you know. There's the pride in the fact that, you know, since I've been here, we've always been competitive, you know. We've never been a bottom dweller, but we haven't been all the way to the top either. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
All right, so there's Blake Wheeler. An interesting comment right off the bat that if the team had that run in 2018, he would not have re-signed here. Wasn't a lot of. I mean, I think this organization, as much as Blake Wheeler's done for it, this organization's done a lot for Blake as well, and this city and whatnot. We didn't really hear any of that, but you know, it was about the opportunity to win and to be competitive. And I guess you could say that this team has been competitive. If, you know, making the playoffs more often than not is the bar. I mean, yeah, sure. But I think it's also pretty clear that there was a potential of much more, and, you know, that hasn't materialized. And in a lot of ways, things have, well, certainly regressed a bit from that point, and that is natural. I mean, when you lose the type of players that happened with the Jets for a number of reasons, probably difficult to get right back to that level, but that's the job. That's what everyone was trying to do, and you could hear a lot of that disappointment in Wheeler's answer to that. But he was up there with Connor Hellebuyck, and as I've said a number of times, I mean, to me, Hellebuyck is the linchpin to this entire offseason. Can the Winnipeg Jets extend him? Is he interested in extending? Does he believe in where the team is going to, for a guy that said his number one and really only goal was to win a Stanley Cup? Does he think he can do that in Winnipeg? That was a big part of the topics in and around Helly. This is Hellebuyck just on how he looked at the season that just passed.
Yeah, you know, we did some great things this year. Took a non-playoff team, was in first for a while, battled some adversity, which every team does, made playoffs, and the feeling in the room was great. Going into the series, it was a great feeling. Like, we thought we had a chance. We did have a chance. I think we had a chance in every single game. Maybe not the last one, but in every other game, we were right there. Seems to be the storyline, us being just right there. But, you know, there's a lot of heart and soul in that room that gave it their all, and I guess that's all you can ask for.
All right, so Hellebuyck looking back positively on the season, and I think a lot of what he said is true, Reem. I won't really dispute any of that. It does almost just sort of omit, you know, about a 30-game stretch in the second half of the season where, you know, you mentioned, we were in first for a while, and then he had to play 13 straight games to drag this team into the playoffs. So, listen, I'm a positive person. I don't mind leaning on the positive side of things, especially in a situation like that. But I think it's pretty clear that there are way bigger questions for the organization to answer for Connor Hellebuyck based on what his plans are going forward. And number 6, Reem, is Hellebuyck talking about if he's thought about negotiations this summer, all relating to his future.
I haven't thought about negotiations at all. I think that's a better question for Chevy. Could be important. I haven't had my meeting yet, so I don't know where his mind's at, but for me, I just Like I keep saying every year, I just want to win a cup. So I don't know what the future of this team is going to look like. I don't know what their plans are, and I don't know if I'm in it. To be honest, I'm not sure what they're thinking. As far as I'm concerned, is I'm going to give everything wherever I am. If they decide to move me, that's their call. If they decide to try to talk, I haven't really thought about that yet. So time's on my side. I got all summer, so I'm not in any rush.
Yeah, that was the first of a couple of comments from Connor Hellebuyck that, maybe gave us a little bit of an eye into where his head is at right now. And we certainly didn't hear, oh, I'd love to stay here for the rest of my career. I really believe in where we're going, and I believe in this group, and I'd love to get an extension done. And, maybe that's partly negotiating. I'm not sure. But he's not a guy that I think ever, we joke about the truth serum. Connor Hellebuyck has, at least in his mind, I don't think he ever BS's anybody. If someone asks him a tough question, and we've seen this happen before, he'll just simply say, I don't want to answer that. So I think we're getting the honest look on Connor Hellebuyck as to what he thinks about his situation. I think it's very much up in the air. Hellebuyck, number 6 is, we just did number 6, so yeah, we want to go. Yeah, here's 7. Hellebuyck on if he would like to know the immediate and long-term plan of the club
here in Winnipeg.
Definitely, yes. I'm not interested in a rebuild. I'm just looking to compete every year. This year was so fun, and then getting into the playoffs, it's a different style of game. You only get so many of those, and going through 5 games of them I enjoyed myself more in 5 games than I did all year. And I know from previous experiences, every round gets more intense and more fun, and it's like a high you got to chase, and you can't replicate that anywhere else other than the playoffs and in the NHL. So that's all I'm really looking forward to, is trying to get myself back in those playoffs and a chance.
All right, and always interesting stuff from Hellebuyck. The one thing that came out of that, and this was before he was really even asked about it. I guess he was asked about it in a roundabout way. And he was the first of many players, Reem, that said that they are not interested in a rebuild. And I guess it all depends on what people are describing or what your definition of a rebuild is. But it doesn't seem, and I understand Hellebuyck, in his prime where he's at, doesn't want to be on a team that for a couple years is, more concerned about a first draft pick like we saw in so many spots this year in the National Hockey League than competing for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, they asked a bunch of guys, what do you think about a rebuild? And I don't think any players would be like, yeah, I think we need to rebuild here and start.
Fully in for that.
Next fully year. In. So, every guy obviously said no, because, how terrible would that be? Being like, oh, you're on Chicago or Arizona where you have absolutely no chance. So, I mean, they're not wrong saying they do have a chance, every year at getting into the playoffs, but it seems like they're just okay with getting in that last spot and rolling the dice and seeing what happens. Because, we did see Seattle, number 7, and Florida, number 8, and in the East, sorry, those teams won. So, we've seen teams get in, but you probably have a better chance of winning if you're in one of those upper spots in the conference.
Well, and you know what I mean? As much as I said that from a fan base perspective, I think we all expected to hear more from Kevin Cheveldayoff as far as where does this team go going forward? What is the plan for the future? And, I hope that will be more clear, and we'll hear more about that, in the coming, weeks. Certainly, as we mentioned, we're less than 2 months away from the draft. Which is an incredibly important part of the NHL offseason. And I would imagine tons of the work is going to be happening before then. But after what Hellebuyck had said, and again, I'm sure I would hope the conversations with the players from the GM had a little more meat to it than what we got as far as the media and the fans yesterday. But it's quite clear that, there is in some ways, especially for a player like Hellebuyck, who's so important and will be in so high demand around the league, a bit of a sales pitch to, explain and sell a player like that has a lot of his own control in his future about what this is going to look for like going forward. Let's do number 11. This is one more from Helly on just how the last 5 years have lived up to expectations following signing his contract after that run to the conference championship.
We've fought for playoffs, I'd say, majority of our years, which is fun. It is. It's stressful, but it's fun. I think our biggest year was the year after going to the conference finals. I think that was our real window at doing something special. And then ever since then, I think we've been chasing that high and giving ourselves chances. And I know we haven't really gotten to where we want to go. But I mean, there's got to be something to be said about giving yourself a chance every single year. Like that's some skilled hockey that we've been playing. There's a lot of good players in this room. I know that. A lot of skilled players, a lot of good hockey players. Maybe together it just didn't work. I know every single guy could go anywhere and be successful. Maybe together it just didn't work, or maybe our window wasn't this year. It's hard to say, but the fact we gave ourselves a chance, and really when you're at the end of the day, that's you take that. It started out every season. You said, okay, you're gonna give yourself a chance at a cup. You take that. So we can't look at it like a failure in any way, because there's a lot of teams that wish they were in our shoes right now.
All right, there's Connor Hellebuyck, and the one thing, and Remo, we were in the room, and I think every regular listener knows that I'm a Team Helly guy. I believe that he is the franchise player of this team. I think that having Connor Hellebuyck in the net gives the Winnipeg Jets a chance to win every night that they go out, and I think that this entire situation is so incredibly different if Hellebuyck's not a part of it. That he is the most important player on this team, and his future is the most important. And I've been somewhat optimistic on this show. We all remember my back and forth with Jeff a month or two ago about, can they sign Connor Hellebuyck? And I said, hey, you give him, a deal worthy of what he's earned as one of, or the top goaltender in the National Hockey League. I think it'd be nuts not to do it. I have to admit, I still hope that happens. But I couldn't help but feel, and again, this goes to a guy that I think is a hell of a lot more honest than just about every other player when they're in front of a microphone. He tells you exactly how he's feeling. I don't know about you being in the room as well, but I felt that there was maybe a bit of an air of finality to that. And my heli meter for him returning and being here long term, to be honest, took a bit of a hit after listening to that answer in particular.
Yeah, I think part of it was you hear him say he really, wants to win a cup, and that's his number one goal. He never said that he believes he could do it here and this is the place where he wants to do it. He said, maybe the combination of players we have didn't work in terms of living up to the expectations that had been set after 2018. I remember when they lost to Vegas, I was like, well, it's fine. They're going to be in the conference final like the next year. No problem at all. And then they had that amazing start to 2019, but since that second half, it's kind of been downhill, and as he said, chasing that high of getting back to the conference final. So I kind of agree. It felt like a funeral for the season. Us, like overall the tone of it, because that's kind of what it was. You're looking back on the season, but it felt like something bigger when those guys were in the room. It felt very heavy with some of the questions being asked about legacy and the last 5 years. Maybe it was just because of the questions, but knowing that those two guys have a year left on their contracts, there's it's going to come to some resolution here this summer. I'll figure out what's going on for next year.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to hear from Connor, Dubois, and a couple more, as well as Bones. Just got to give a thanks to our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market. If you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too, pop by one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores, or hit them up online at myvita.ca. If you're looking for a great, simple, and easy way to get your healthy fats, which are beneficial for your skin, brain, joint, and heart health. Health First Omega Supreme is on sale now at Vita Health Fresh Market. Get your healthy fats the easy way with this one-a-day soft gel. On sale all month at Vita Health Fresh Market. 7 Winnipeg locations, empowering people to lead healthy lives. Check them out at any of the locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. Well, spring is here, and I know many of you may have needs on both your fence or maybe an overhead garage door. Wallace & Wallace is Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialists, serving residential and commercial customers since 1946. If you need the security and protection of a new fence, or if winter's done a number on your old one, they've got you covered with vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And if it's time to replace your garage door, Wallace & Wallace also has Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. Give them a buzz, 204-452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenniston. How's the closet looking heading into spring, fellas? If you need to up your menswear game, head on over to F Apparel. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. They are also the leaders in wedding and wedding party suits. Don't waste your time and money renting tuxes. Get your suits done at F Apparel, and the entire wedding party will get a 15% discount when you get your suits at F Apparel, and a free custom shirt and tie as well for all 2023 high school grads with the purchase of a new suit. F Apparel is at 190 Smith Street downtown. You can make an appointment at F. That's EPHapparel.com. And all the new summer blizzard flavors are rolling at Nick and Nicky DQ right now, not to mention all those great eats, including the new stack burgers, which are amazing. Pop down and see them at DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's, and DQ Niverville. And you can always hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba if you do need a custom ice cream or blizzard cake for an upcoming event. All right, Remo, let's get to Kyle Connor. We'll start it off with number 15. Connor was one of the players who was very underwhelming in game number 5 in particular of this series. He was asked right off the bat about what he thought about the comments post-game from Coach Bones.
I think that applied to all of us, the whole team. Obviously a really emotional guy coming off. We just lost. Probably not our best effort in that game, so he's obviously fired up. We're all fired up. He let his emotions show. I don't know if if you'd ask him to do it again, I'm sure he'd phrase it a little differently. It's, I guess the issue I have with it is just kind of coming out of nowhere, if that's really how he felt. And, he kind of came into the locker room after the game and said a little something to us there. And then obviously said what he said in the media. So I think made a little more transparency before that. But other than that, it's obviously I just see a really emotional guy.
Has he addressed it since? Have you guys? I just had my meeting, so we talked about it there. But I'll let you share what. Yeah, I'm not going to say what we talked about there.
All right, so there's Kyle Connor, and Connor in particular. When he talked about their best players were so much better than our best players, to use Rick Bowness's quote. I think we knew, some of the players that he was really pointing his finger at, and that certainly was Kyle Connor. And here, let's go to number 16 right here from KFC, because we wanted to hear what the players had to say about being aired out the way that they did, but also looking forward to the future for a player that has a long-term contract and a number of years remaining on it here in Winnipeg. Here's what KFC is expecting or hoping this roster to be.
It's tough to say. I really wish I maybe come up here and give you guys a better answer, but that's the GM's job. And, obviously I hope that we put the best roster we can, and we're gonna have a chance to win next year. And, what that looks like, I have no idea. I'm sure every guy will tell you the same thing in here. We have hopes in what's going to happen, but every contract situation is different. Every player is different in their own time in their career. And, I guess only time will tell how that unfolds here.
All right, there's a couple more from Kyle Connor, and this is interesting, and this is something that I really wanted to hear from players. I mean, just how do they explain, such a great start to the season, being where they were, and then what happened during that long stretch where the team, fell down to being tied for the 8th spot before getting across the finish line as a playoff team. Here's Connor on what happened when they had such that long stretch of really underwhelming hockey.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would have to, debrief a little better, but I do know that there's ups and downs in the season, and, that wasn't our best time of year. I think going into the playoffs, we were playing some of our best hockey, though. I think we learned from it. Obviously unfortunate the way the playoffs went, but, going into that, I think we grown from, the February. We had a little bit of a slide, and, we weren't playing our best hockey, but towards the end of the year, I thought we were playing really good hockey going to the playoffs. Showed in game 1, and obviously not the result we wanted, though.
All right, so there's Connor. And, I mean, unfortunately, when you hear Kyle talk about that, they did sort of find their way, in those final few games of the season to get into the playoffs. And, I mean, I don't know if anyone disagrees. I mean, the first 4 periods of the Vegas series were the best hockey we've seen the Winnipeg Jets play in forever. But the Vegas Golden Knights pushed back, to use a Rick Bowness term, and the Jets did not have a lot of answers for it after that, crushing double OT loss in Game 3, and certainly in Game number 5. And obviously there's a big question about this core, of which Kyle Connor is very much a part of. Kyle just spoke to the core's lack of success and if there's a need for a change within that core.
We've had great success with the core you're talking about. Yeah, we haven't won a cup, but we've shown that we can pretty close get there. We're pretty close, but that's not my decision to make. Obviously, I've gone close with all those guys, and would love another crack at it with those guys. But we'll see what happens. I don't know.
All right. Now, I mean, listen, as I mentioned, we've got like 100 clips of stuff, and we'll probably be dabbling into this over the course of the next number of days. And we'll certainly spend some more time with what Kevin Cheveldayoff had to say. But before we bring in Hammer, we got to get to a little bit of Rick Bowness, because I think it's important for the upcoming conversation to hear what Bones had to say after what we heard from a number of players, maybe most notably Blake Wheeler, with quote, didn't like the way he handled himself afterwards. 76. And by the way, Bones was not scheduled to speak. And I'm not sure, maybe Jeff will have a theory on why this changed, but Dubois and Perfetti had just finished. Everyone was about to leave. And then Scott Brown had come back and said, Bones is speaking. If anyone was watching the live stream, Ken Wee basically recreated the infamous WST GIF live in front of us. It was a little bit of a surprising moment. But Bones came out shortly thereafterwards. And first things first, he talked about his response to his players, publicly expressing their dissatisfaction about how he aired them out after that disappointing loss to end their season.
Well, I'll just answer your questions. You've been talking to the players now, and I think it's fair. I'll come in and answer your questions to me rather than delay it.
Okay. So
I'd rather deal with it head on than delay it.
Good enough. Players from Blake to Kyle Connor to Adam Lowry say they didn't like the way you handled post-game in Vegas.
Yep.
Your response?
And they're probably right. But, one of my many faults is that I'm too emotional and I wear my heart on my sleeve. That being said, I criticize myself for the choice of words. The message, the clear message, is one that I will never accept that kind of an effort in a game like that. I'll never accept that. So again, you can criticize me for the choice of words. That's fine, but never will I accept a game like that. The hidden message, more or less, is that I never want them to be satisfied okay, we made the playoffs, we got to round one. Like, I never want them to be satisfied with that. So there's a kind of a message in there that, okay, yeah, it's good that we got here, but I will never be satisfied just getting in the 8th spot and getting into the first round. I never want them to be satisfied. And there's a third message that won't be shared with you guys.
All right, so there's how Bones started it off. And I mean, listen, I don't know about you. Tell us in the chat. I appreciated Bones. I mean, listen, sure, there's, part of coaching, especially in today's National Hockey League, is massaging the egos and hurt feelings when sometimes things are said. And there obviously were some of those after what Bones had to say. But when he said, I will never accept an effort like that, that spoke to the fans. That might have been the one thing that really spoke to this fan base throughout the entire weekend of everything we heard in front of that microphone. And the other thing that seemed to me in stark contrast from a lot of things that we heard from some players and the GM the next day was, I'll never be satisfied with just being there in the playoffs. I mean, we kind of did get to that. Now, maybe those are some guys that know that they're out and they're defending their record over the course of it. But it was just so different, much like most of what we've heard all season long. Very different from the coach than some of the other players around the club. And it was refreshing. I think it helped. And it was absolutely necessary. And this team needs more of that. So Bones came out. Let's go to 78, Reem, because he sort of said that, maybe some of the words that I regretted. I mean, listen, I'm not sure that he really did, but I think he probably had to, in some ways address that because of what the players had to say. This is 78. This is on Bones. He was asked him, well, what did he regret, or what words did he regret about what he had to say?
Not disappointed, but disgusted was probably too strong a word. Because, listen, we had a great year. We did. What were our goals when we all met together in September? We had to change the culture. We did. It's a great culture in there right now. We had to make the playoffs. We did. Those were the goals. So don't lose sight of those. We accomplished what they brought our coaching staff in, we accomplished. So we're not going to lose all of that because of a really bad game in Game 5 when you needed it the most. So all my criticism was based on that game. Did we fight back in Game 3? Yeah, we did. Did we like the fact that we were down 4-1 at home? No. 3-1 at home? No. But we fought back in Game 3. So all my frustration is based on that one game, not the series. Because this series, we could have won this series. We could have. And I've never talked to you guys about losing Mo and Scheif because you know me, I don't make excuses. I look for solutions. So I was never going to talk to you, well, we could have won Game 3 if we had Mo, or Game 4 if we had both of them. I was never going to do that. I don't make excuses. We look for solutions. So again, that's probably part of the frustration of the way we played in Game 5. And honestly, we had a good practice the day before. We had good meetings that day. Going into that game, we felt pretty good, where the staff did. And then to give up that easy goal in the first period, right off the bat, that really hurt. And then giving up those 2 easy goals right off the bat in the second, like that really, really hurt. And we just didn't recover from it. So there was previous pushbacks, absolutely. Even when I mentioned February, there was games that we didn't push back hard enough, but there was also some games that we did. So I don't lose sight of those things. So yeah.
All right. So there's some of the more important clips from Rick Bowness. And again, we're not going to play Chevy before. I mean, we do have some clips, and I'm sure over the course of this week we'll play them. As I say, we've got so much content to dive into. But Hammer's ready to go, and he's got a big piece at the Winnipeg Free Press, and we'll talk about it, about Chevy's presser yesterday. Just before we do that, we are so pumped to have Assiniboia Downs back on board with Winnipeg Sports Talk, and spring is here. May long weekend's not too far away, and live racing starts on the 22nd. So circle that date on your calendars. You can find out more at asdowns.com on the upcoming season. And of course, the Triple Crown begins this weekend. And Friday, we'll have a little treat to get us ready for the big race. Our pal Kirk Contois will join us, but great to have ASD back on with us, and cannot wait to get out to the track, beginning with the start of live racing on May 27th. It was great. We were talking about Goldeye season and Bomber season coming up. Princess Auto, huge supporters and sponsors of both the Bombers and the Goldeyes and Winnipeg Sports Talk, and really everything Winnipeg. We can't thank them enough for doing what they've done for us. And of course, Princess Auto is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. Visit them today or shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Well, Consolidated Supply is the leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, and golf carts. As the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba, they've got both new and used golf carts ready to go for you, and other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchen options, and of course, small engine parts and repair. Whatever your spring and summer plans are, Consolidated Supply can help you get there, particularly if you're thinking about irrigation systems for a property. Talk to our pal Joe over there. You can pop by and see them at their new showroom, which is open to the public at 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. Well, the Whites are put away for the season, but Royal Sports is just getting ready for spring right now. As I mentioned, NFL draft on the weekend. Great new draft caps this year. They're all there, obviously, unless they're sold out at Royal Sports for your favorite team. So if you're fired up for the upcoming NFL season, you can get suited up at Royal Sports. Obviously, they have the best selection of licensed merchandise from the NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, and Blue Jays. Had a friend who's getting ready for a Jays trip coming up for May long weekend. Pop by and grab a couple sweet Jays jerseys from Royal yesterday. And it's not just merch as well. Spring stock is arriving daily with soccer, baseball, softball, tennis equipment, and so much more. Not to mention a huge selection of bikes. 750 Pembina Highway. Pop down and see them or follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina. And hey, we got a Game 7 tonight. And the Fanalytics menu is waiting for you at Boston Pizza. Tons of great new offerings tailored to sports fans, including the new triple play combo with Thai chicken bites, cheesy Bandera bread, and cactus cuts. Pop by there tonight for the big game starting at 7 o'clock. And if you're staying in, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we've done a lot of listening. Shout out to everyone in chat, by the way. Great to have another big turnout. I have a feeling this is just the start of a pretty exciting offseason, certainly at least here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hopefully the fans will be fired up at some point with moves. What's happening? Well, we're not sure. There's a lot of talking, not a ton of substance, and let's get to all of that right now with Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Hammer, what's going on? Great seeing you on the weekend.
Huss, good to see you too. First day off in 12 straight days of working Jets playoffs, and wouldn't you have it, I don't feel great. So apparently I need to be running myself into the ground to feel normal, but certainly looking forward to this hit. What a weekend it was. What a last – at first it was a great 24, then it was a crazy 48, then it was a wild 72-hour stretch, and certainly 96. No, what is it? Yeah, 98 or whatever, or 40, 96 hours. My math is horrible. I'm a journalist. So what a time to talk Jets. Let's get to it.
Well, let's kind of go through the weekend almost chronologically. I found the most interesting player availabilities was the ones right off the bat with Blake Wheeler and Connor Hellebuyck. And, Hellebuyck was somewhat introspective, was his kind of unique self. He had gave his thoughts on where things were at. But we've discussed this before, as someone that, believes that he's the franchise player and the key to keeping things going forward. As I mentioned, my optimism level for their ability to keep him around was diminished by listening to what he said. But I also said, well, let's wait till we hear from Kevin Cheveldayoff on kind of the answers to his questions. Needless to say, we didn't get to that. And then there was Blake Wheeler, who was more than willing to say that he didn't appreciate what Rick Bowness had to say, to the extent of didn't like the way he handled himself.
Isn't that rich?
Well, I mean, you were in the room. I mean, what did you think about those two players? You kind of spoke to different things at very different points in their career.
Whether you liked their honesty or not, I thought that the first two guys in Blake Wheeler and Connor Hellebuyck were the most honest, because it became very evident over that, at least to me, that neither of these guys are going to be back next. For Blake Wheeler to end it like that, I mean, if that is indeed the end for 26 here, I just thought it just to me summed up exactly what he stood for this entire time. There was not, it's not all on Blake Wheeler and all, and certainly not all on Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, I just thought the player interviews as a whole, as I'm sure we're not going to go through every single one of these guys, but it's not even so much what they said. It's what they didn't say. And two things in particular stood out to me. Like, look, I don't think you can disagree with any of the players if they say, I didn't like the way Rick Bowness handled that decision, go out and to blast us the way that he did. I don't think you want players I don't think anybody likes to be criticized. So it's not so much acknowledging that you didn't like how he handled it, that you had to find out through the media and all these things of what he said. And that, that you certainly know that Mark Chipman and Kevin Cheveldayoff didn't like it, because it dominated not just the narrative in Winnipeg, but over the NHL for a while. You had people tuning in about how dysfunctional it seemed to make the Jets organization and everything. So it was a bit of a fire. But from the players, from the standpoint of the player interviews, again, okay to acknowledge you didn't like the delivery, but nobody in every, maybe Hellebuyck was the closest to come with some truth about how they played, but like nobody acknowledged that what he was saying was true. Like nobody, in fact, some people went even further to disagree with what he was saying, that when the Jets best players need to be their best players, they weren't. I mean, that was just outlandish to me, how you couldn't agree with it, particularly in the context of just Game 5. I mean, you got to acknowledge that was a bad effort in a must-win game. And the other part I thought was interesting was, Blake Wheeler and Kyle Connor, I think, were two of the guys that said it most, was that, like, it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, are you serious? Like, this has been the call all season long from Rick Bowness. I mean, how many times, it wasn't that long ago that he said, if some of these guys think they're giving it all, they're dreaming. I mean, the players had if the players never caught that, live, they had interviews the next day all about that. I mean, this team's been hammered with this kind of criticism. So to feel like this was somewhat out of the blue was just so bizarre to me. And then finally, not one guy, not Blake Wheeler, who, yeah, I guess you lost your C, that was obviously needed because other people felt they needed a voice in the room. Rick Bowness still made you a top 6 player for long stretches. You didn't deserve to be believed to be a top 6 player. Josh Morrissey couldn't stick up for his coach, who made him a Norris Trophy candidate this year and allowed his offense to flourish. That was the first thing that Rick Bowness said was coming, was the defense. No one benefited more than that than Josh Morrissey. Mark Scheifele scored 42 goals, a career high. He couldn't have his coaches back. Heck, he didn't have his last 2 coaches back, so that's not surprising to see that. Kyle Connor led this team in points. Not one guy could stand up and say, yeah, I didn't like what he said, but what he said was the truth. The lack of accountability is just striking with this team. And it's the reason, and this will be the legacy that Blake Wheeler leaves behind. He wanted to, he gave it his all. Absolutely he did. Played through injuries. Absolutely he did. But he also was the model of lack of accountability throughout the entire process. And so it's just bled into this team, and we saw it on full display. I'm getting messages from people across the country laughing at the Winnipeg Jets, and it just capped off with Kevin Cheveldayoff's presser, because he talked for 42 minutes, but he said absolutely nothing. And now the Jets have the beautiful job of going into the summer trying to fix their team, which is going to seem like next to impossible, and then they're going to have to encourage their fan base to buy tickets. And I don't know, Hutz, at this point, and I've gone to the buffet here, I don't know which one's more difficult, and I don't know which one the Jets are more capable of handling.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot to get to in that, and we will get to Cheveldayoff and talk about your column in a minute. We will get to Bones, but I'm glad you brought up Josh Morrissey. to me. And Remo, if you can, tee up clip number 34. I want to play this just before we get into this next one. But listen, was I surprised that Blake sort of had his take on it the way that he did and felt empowered to express it that way? Not really. We know who Blake Wheeler is, and that's a guy that I think certainly he's a proud guy, but feels like he has the ability to speak that way, and he went and did it. As much as I disagree with it, and I'm totally with you, would have really appreciate some acknowledgement that wasn't just some off-base comments from a guy that was pissed off that they lost, that there was a lot of truth into that. I was left wanting more from Josh Morrissey, to be honest. And there's two guys that we talk about, last
Adam Lowry, you can throw in that group too.
Well, I was just about to say, and that's the clip.
Those guys took a massive hit on their leadership this year. If these guys want to be captains next year, holy smokes, did they take a hit?
Well, this was what Lowry had to say on that, and I think it's important to play this one in the context of what we're talking about. This was when Adam Lowry was asked about what Bones had to say after Game 5.
I don't know if I think it was targeted at our whole team. So, we would have wished that maybe Rick would have just come to us and told us how he felt rather than kind of going into the media and saying those things. Especially if that's the way he felt since February. I think could have had some conversations and maybe tried to make some changes. So, I don't think our group didn't have any pushback. I don't think, the comments were necessarily accurate of how we feel our team is. And I think sometimes your emotions run high. You say things that aren't necessarily as descriptive as you would want them to be, or they're so blunt that it doesn't seem, or it doesn't generally paint the picture how you'd hope it to be painted. So I think that's the thing. We'll have talks with Rick. We'll see where exactly where he's coming from, where he's at with those comments, and go from there.
All right, so there's Adam Lowry, and listen, I'll say this. I think both of these guys are great teammates and have a lot of support for their club, and that's part of what leadership is. And in some ways, maybe they were backing the rest of their teammates at it. I would have loved to have heard a little acknowledgement that we understood why he was saying it. Whatever, that didn't happen. Josh wasn't even in the game, so maybe he's sort of backing the guys that he goes to war with all the time, and is in a bit of a different situation because he wasn't in it. I mean, for Lowry, Lowry's the one guy that I think you could pretty much count on being there, shift in and shift out throughout the playoffs, including Game 5. And, he didn't have a lot of help. But this was, listen, you just heard it. You kind of topped on it before. But, in particular for those guys who are really thought to be the core of this leadership group moving forward, the leaders on the Winnipeg Jets that will be hopefully carrying in a new culture, the reaction to those two players in particular, especially what we just heard from Adam.
Yeah, I don't really know what else there is to say besides those players should have taken the opportunity to own some of it. You know what I mean? I know Josh Morrissey wasn't in the series, but to look back at at this year as some kind of glowing success, you don't need to outright apologize for it. I know some fans would probably like an apology. I don't find myself in that camp, but some kind of acknowledgement for the fans of the city. That's the other thing about this. Nobody used their platform to talk about, to thank the fans, to thank, the paying fans, the ones that, pay their contracts, the ones that fuel this league. It to me, it's just shocking. And specifically to 17 and 44, I don't know if this is like the lingering Blake Wheeler effect, or if they truly just don't believe they need to be accountable and like this. But I get it's raw and fresh. It's not 2 minutes after Game 5. This is a couple days after, and time for reflection. So for nobody, and particularly Josh Morrissey and Adam Lowry, the two guys that appear to be, lack of a better phrase, duking it out for the next captain of this team, to have not one of those guys really step up and share kind of, the ownership of this season and how disappointing it was, and how you want it, both of them are coming back, right? Like, how we're going to do our best to be better next season, all the cliche stuff that, it might sound blah, 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 but when it's not uttered, in other words, like, lots of excuses, and particularly when they spoke directly to the leadership, pretty much just bowed down to 26. And, Josh Morrissey saying this, I don't even know what the point is. Ask the coach, like almost as if he disagreed with the decision. It seems to me that there's obviously a something broken there. The hesitancy to step up and feel ownership of a room. The reality is this is no longer Blake Wheeler's team. Like, it shouldn't be Blake Wheeler's team. It should be the younger group, usher in a new era's team. Someone needs to step through. And while, I don't think you can put a full assessment, obviously, to their leadership in one moment. Wow, did that seem like a missed opportunity to not dump on anybody, but to own some of it as the future, as the current and potentially future captains of this team.
Well, you know what? We'll save the Dubois situation going forward, because that's going to be something we'll be talking about probably every day as to where it is. But I mean, if you were hoping that Pierre-Luc Dubois was going to show up and say, you know what, this actually was a good season, I believe in this team, I'm open to it, it didn't happen. And it just essentially reinforced everybody's thoughts that he was going to be out of here ASAP. And that could very well have been the last time he speaks with the Winnipeg media as a member of the Winnipeg Jets on the weekend. But after the players were finished up, Bones came out, and that wasn't originally part of the plan. I mean, they told us right off the bat that the coach and the general manager were not going to be speaking today. First of all, were you surprised that changed? Why do you think it did? And then we'll get into what we heard from Rick Bowness, which was still very different than just about everyone else that was in front of a microphone for the entire weekend.
Yeah, like surprised, no, because I don't think it was Rick Bowness's call to wait the next day. Like, I think that's just a Jets thing, right? I mean, especially when you look at their last, couple days. I think the PR department with Winnipeg was working overtime, after the season, really seconds after the season was over, and probably didn't need probably wanted to control it even more than usual to make sure that they weren't dealing with fireworks again. And then, whether or not they were aware or orchestrated, none of that. This united response, ultimately disagreeing with Bowness's actions, whether that was, whether Rick was let know of that and whether he wanted to answer for it. I just think they looked at it and didn't need to have, okay, this is now the news cycle for one day, everyone disagrees with coach. And then the next day is okay. And another 24-hour news cycle of the coach, whatever his response is, just to get them out together. So whether that was, it seemed like Rick did say that was his desire to come out, whether that was the Jets' desire, I guess we don't know. But interesting that he did come out. And it was, I thought he certainly walked back some of his comments. I mean, the two things that I take away as far as walking, could he have used better words? Yeah. Disgusted is pretty pointed. It's a pretty juicy headline. Disgusted is way worse than disappointed, right? So, for him, does he regret using that word? Yeah, probably. But to me, I saw a guy who just has a passion for hockey, but probably even more importantly, a passion for the city. And I think a lot of fans would have liked to see some of that passion, seep into the players, because Rick Bowness, as we know, played for this organization and Jets 1.0, coached this organization and Jets 1.0. In his time here as coach in Jets 2.0, he's a guy that everybody, he's a guy that everybody, that certainly loves the city, has acknowledged the whiteout over and over, acknowledges fans, loves everything about this city, bleeds Winnipeg. And to me, I saw a guy who was frustrated that he wasn't getting enough of that from his players. And so even though he did walk back the disgusted word, and he stood behind the rest of it. I mean, he did kind of, I thought, limit it to Game 5. I mean, you did mention January, February about your top players not having
multiple
any pushback multiple times, and throughout the year. So maybe he just didn't want to add fuel to the fire there, whatever. He definitely took it back. But I also think what he was saying, I don't think he softens those conversations necessarily in his one-on-one with the players. And I think Rick Bowness knows that there's going to be change here. I think everybody knows there's going to be change here, or at least there's going to be attempt to be change here. And while I do think there's some bridges that maybe need to be mended, I don't think that's going to be all that difficult, because I think Rick Bowness is here to stay. He's got the confidence of Kevin Cheveldayoff, and one of his biggest assets is his bluntness. I guess it's come to backfire a bit here, but it's his brutal honesty and willingness to deal with things head on and not let them, whatever, simmer over time.
You know what? I'll actually probably disagree. I don't think they have backfired at all. If anything, Rick Bowness is the one guy right now in that building that I think this fan base believes in, that I think that his fan base appreciates where he's coming from. And we talk about passion. He says he has a lot. I still remember he missed the 9 of the first 10 games and came back onto the bench. And this was very early in his time coaching this team. And he mentioned at one point how quiet the bench was, how and he started talking about how, hockey players need to play with passion. And that level of passion, unfortunately, was missing all too often for this club. And if you want to see the difference between what the Winnipeg Jets are missing compared to some of the other teams around the league that might not be as talented as them, might not have the personnel that they have, but their level of passion, compete, will to battle has been on display in these Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think about a team like the Islanders. I mean, the Islanders, went into Carolina and sold out for 60 minutes doing everything they could to get that series back. And then they took it to overtime against a Carolina team. I mean, those are the sort of things that we're really missing with the Winnipeg Jets after Vegas punched them in the mouth, after they looked like the second coming of the 80s Oilers for 4 periods in that. And to me, I mean, when we talk about the sort of players that this team needs, I mean, obviously you need to have some players that have skill that can get the job done, but the actual identity core of this team didn't have enough passion, and Rick Bowness has a ton of it. Fans appreciate that, and they sure as hell appreciated his frank honesty because, let's face it, fans in this city have been BS'd for a long time, and there's been a lot of things that have been sugar-coated to protect the players and protect their feelings, and maybe we now know why. Because when they did get a cold, hard dose of reality coming off of an absolutely horrible game, which meant everything to them sticking around and playing longer this season, basically there was, to go back to an old Mauriceism, a lot of ruffled feathers on Saturday from that group. And I mean, that when you're talking about competitors and guys that have a lot of passion, to me, that shouldn't have been where the anger was placed. It was more on what the heck happened to them in the middle of the season that we heard over and over again. And most importantly, and most recently, the complete lack of pushback, to use Rick's quote, in a game that their season was on the line.
Well, and there's other questions that come out of that, right? Like the makeup of this team. Okay, if that's the case, there seems to be very little killer instinct here, right? There seems to be very little interest in playing a structure that is as demanding as the one Rick Bowness has put in. I mean, he talks about the word aggressive all the time. It's not necessarily having to be aggressive in physicality and having to finish every single check, but it is aggressive on the puck, smart defending, smart, quick transition, constantly going. Like, it just seems like, how many times have we heard over this season guys doing their own things or guys going off and on their own programs and whatever, right? Guys talk privately in the dressing room about how, they get their pre-scouts every day and they, guys would be nodding heads and they go out and do something completely different. That to me is not just, it doesn't necessarily signal a rebellion or a complete disagreement with the coach. It definitely could be that, but it almost feels at this point, given it was the same thing under Dave Lowry, the same thing certainly under Paul Maurice, is that I just don't think this team is built that way. I just don't think that they're built to play a hard defensive checking style. And that's where, where you can like your core all you want. You either need to find a coach that's going to let them play that free-like hockey that seems to be so habitually ingrained with this team, or find different players to play a harder to play against style of hockey. And I would argue that the second option is probably your route to success, and why the Jets need to, under Rick Bowness, identify the style of players in which they need to, to compete in this structure. I mean, look at the two guys that were picked up over the trade deadline, and Vladislav Nemestikov and Nino Niederreiter. I mean, they ultimately set the bar for effort. after they were acquired in March, and to have those guys come into a system late and be the ones that seemingly are executing at its highest, on at least on a consistent basis, is an indictment to the rest of the roster and how it's made up. And that falls on Kevin Cheveldayoff, obviously, and it'll be, apparently his job now to get them out of that and to find the right players. And hopefully, with this offseason, there's very, 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 I've heard from scouts, the worst, free agency period coming up this summer. That bodes well for the Winnipeg Jets who have trade pieces, because it's going to be those teams aren't going to have nearly the number and quality of players hitting free agency this summer. But they know for sure that there's a handful of Jets players that showed no inclination, no suggestion whatsoever that they were interested in returning long term. And so you have to think Kevin Cheveldayoff's phone will be ringing. We'll see what happens, from those calls.
Well, I agree with you on that. And you know what, coming out, and I said this last week, I mean, and maybe I was naive. I guess obviously in retrospect, I was. I was expecting to hear a lot more from Kevin Cheveldayoff because of the situation. I mean, everyone that pays attention to this team knows that this is the most intriguing offseason with some major, major decisions to be made by the club we've probably ever seen. I mean, they've kicked the can down the road for the last couple of years, and it's brought us to this point. And now, and we don't need to go over it, it's Hellebuyck, it's Scheifele, it's Dubois, Wheeler. I mean, there's 1 year left on all of that. And I think we all know or assume that there's no way in hell the Winnipeg Jets can afford to just run it back one more time and then have all these players leave and be left with nothing. So I was expecting to hear, and listen, I understand he's not going to get up in front of the microphone and say, yeah, this guy's gone, we're trading this guy for sure, half the roster's going to be different. Like that would also be naive. But I did think that there would be a little bit more meat to a plan going forward. And I mean, from my perspective, Jeff, it was a lot of, well, this is the start of the offseason. We're going to be meeting, we're going to be doing evaluations, and we're just starting all the process. But I think this fan base in this city needed a little bit more of a bone to give an idea about how things were going forward. And I mean, hopefully that happens in the future, but it really didn't happen at all yesterday. And I don't know, was there anything other than the fact that Rick Bowness was going to be back as the head coach after everything that happened that we really learned on Sunday afternoon?
No, yeah, outside of that, not really. I mean, we learned, I mean, a lot of those things, as you mentioned, right? Does it really make sense for Kevin Cheveldayoff to come out and say, we're rebuilding starting this year, we're open for sale, yada, yada? Probably not, even though that's probably as close to the reality he's facing. Some might suggest that just the way the makeup of their roster with guys like, Kyle Connor under contract for years, Nikolai Ehlers under contract, Josh Morrissey under contract, that they're not really in a position to rebuild. There's too many pieces there. But I mean, at the same time, there was absolutely no inclination whatsoever that there was an effort to long-term anybody either. And again, I don't know if it's much of an advantage for Kevin Cheveldayoff to say that, Pierre-Luc Dubois is our number one priority, right? Or, I think what's clear is for this team, they're going to, my guess is they're going to go to Connor Hellebuyck, immediately figure out what his deal is. I think Connor Hellebuyck's going to say my next contract with you guys starts with $10 million a year. The Jets, I don't think, are in any position to sign that. And I don't know if I completely disagree with it either. But again, I don't think they're going double digits for Connor Hellebuyck. And so then that becomes the first kind of piece, I think, to move a trade, for Connor Hellebuyck. And then the rest of the pieces have to fall from there. I mean, you're going to have guys like Kyle Connor, who is, pretty blunt about not wanting to be part of a rebuild. Well, unless you're getting a goaltender back, it doesn't necessarily have to be as good as Connor Hellebuyck, but it certainly can't be significantly worse. Then you're kind of in that situation. But I think what fans needed out of it, even though I think they wanted, Cheveldayoff to say, this is our plan, this is our avenue, yada, yada. We want to build a winner. We want to, We're going to do everything we can, so on and so forth. I think they would have been happy with just admitting that the status quo isn't working and that we need to be identifying changes to maximize this group if we go with it. Just some acknowledgement that, the standard isn't good enough and that we're going to be putting all our efforts to being better. And I know that sounds cliche, it can be very surface, but sometimes you just need to say it, because if you don't say things like that, and you kind of are insulting a fan base that is educated and aware of the current situation you're facing. I mean, I saw yesterday on social media, that fire, dog sitting in the chair, fire around him, everything's kind of fine. I mean, that's what that press conference felt like. It felt like we, you were living, like everything was around, up in flames around you. And here you are kind of pretending like it's a sunny day out there. And I think some, although you weren't going to, again, give fans a step-by-step what your next plan was, because I don't think whether you're planning to break it down or whether you're planning to do co-status quo or try to build on whatever you have, it didn't make sense to tip your hand, but some acknowledgement that things need to change, regardless of which avenue you go, I think would have gone a long way for fans, and just trusting as they go into this campaign to sell season tickets in a new year that has so much uncertainty surrounding this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, if even something as simple as, at this point, the loss in the playoffs is fresh. There are meetings going on. There's a lot of things that we need to figure out, but we do acknowledge that, this is a huge offseason for the Winnipeg Jets, and there will be changes. How big or small they are, I mean, we're not going to commit to anything right now, but everything is going to be looked at, and just about everything is on the table, other than, as we've said, Rick is our coach. He'll be back. We still believe in a lot of the players on our club. I mean, we're not turning things over. I mean, we're not pressing the nuclear option on this, but there's a lot of work to be done going forward when it comes to, finding out and making this team better, more competitive, and a better team going forward, because that at the end of the goal is. What was weird, and I mean, we hadn't really, I don't know, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, from you probably in more of these, although I pretty much listened to everything that the coaches said or the GM said since he got on the job. But at one point, and I guess maybe this is, I guess the theory on this, Jeff, is that, for Cheveldayoff to come out and be, I understood that he had his players back because those are his players. And at some point, if you express a huge amount of disappointment, like if he went in on a Bones type rant, inevitably it kind of comes back to him as the guy that assembled the roster and put it all together. So, I mean, I think there was some level of defending the team and what they'd accomplished this year, and the fact that they did make the playoffs when a lot of people thought that they wouldn't and were going in the wrong direction. But at the same time, I mean, just even an acknowledgement of where this team is right now in its cycle, and knowing that we aren't just going to be doing the same thing. Like, a lot of people said, oh, great, here we're going. I don't believe for a second we're going to get more of the same. It just didn't seem to make any sense, at least at that time, where there wouldn't even be like a nugget of, this is a bit of a different offseason than the others have been before. And we as an organization have a lot of work to do to figure things out with some key players and keep this thing going in the right direction, and reversing the trend that we've seen over the last 5 years, even if they want to say that this was a bounce back year because they got into the playoffs as opposed to missing the year before.
Well, yeah, and I'll give credit to Judy Owen from the Canadian Press for asking, referencing the fans, and just how much attention is being paid to this offseason, and how critical Kevin Cheveldayoff's work this summer will be on the bottom line, right? With this season ticket campaign that the Jets are currently trying to employ, figure out, maximize, and he just, instead of being like, instead of acknowledging the importance of it and talking about how, this is every off season is important, I'd be crazy to try to suggest to you that this one doesn't have added importance to it. We're hitting a critical juncture in our franchise and potentially, future altering change. All these things we acknowledge, and all things that we need to take into consideration. And, that's just, obviously adding more motivation. I mean, he resorted to saying, I live in the same community. I buy my groceries at the same, at the same grocery stores. I get tripped by my friends at the local coffee shop. It's like, well, yeah, that's great. But it's everybody else who's just kind of asking you to acknowledge the importance of this. And again, I mean, that fell short, and so did any acknowledgement of look, like it's unprecedented here, right? And maybe that's why, and no, that's not maybe. I mean, I think that's why a lot of fans want Mark Chipman to talk. We know how important Mark Chipman is to this franchise, not just as the co-owner, but there's a reason why the Winnipeg Jets don't have a president of hockey operations. Mark Chipman is the president of hockey operations. He's in on every decision. He's the ultimate decider of every decision. And so, how, like, this unprecedented loyalty. I mean, and I loved yesterday, right? And I mean, he was getting peppered with hard questions, Kevin Cheveldayoff was, but the whole, like, don't let facts get in the way. And how he loves to throw in the Canadian teams about how the Jets have, despite having just 3 playoff round victories over the last, in their 12 seasons back. Yeah, compared to the Canadian teams, they're actually in good sitting. But if you're going to compare yourself with the worst playoff performers in the NHL, like, where are we right now, right? It was just, to me, it was just, I mean, there was no surprise. And maybe we thought that it feels like as media, we always go in there thinking, we do go in there thinking we're going to get much of the same, but I think we fooled ourselves this time thinking that this was going to be, just given the obvious of the situation, and the potential, real potential for mass changes to be in this organization. I think we were expecting a little bit different or a little bit more, and just unfortunately got delivered significantly less.
Yeah, and listen, I still do think that we will. Well, I assume that we'll hear that at some point. Certainly, we're going to see the actions of the general manager in the organization that I think will speak to that more than anything we heard yesterday. But I do think, and you mentioned, where the organization is, what they're trying to do, getting some people back on board, getting more companies to buy in and get season tickets, all those things that they have to do, which is totally another department. But a lot of it does hinge on what happens with the hockey club. And more than anything, so many of those decisions depend on the buy-in and belief of fans, companies to, want to be a part of it and want to invest in something that is obviously incredibly important for our city and our community. I just felt like it was a missed opportunity to not acknowledge some of those things and saying, it's very difficult to speak on these things now, but obviously this is not just a regular off season. And it was sort of treated that way. And I don't know, I don't think that they did themselves any favors in the court of public opinion by sort of just not really getting to the meat of the bones. Is that, what, as disappointing as this end of the season was, there are a lot of great men and a lot of great players here, but it's pretty clear that, for a number of reasons, there will be change, and it's going to make for an interesting offseason. Stay tuned. Something like that. Just a little bit to get people somewhat excited or feel confident about the direction of where they're going, because that was one thing that there was none of. I mean, there was not basically we're going to talk to some players, some agents, and then figure things out. I mean, that's sort of the way it sounded, I think, to anyone listening to it. And that may not be fair. I'm sure that's not exactly what the plan is, but as I said, I mean, I don't think they did themselves any favors with just the way they really didn't touch any of the things that are right in front of everyone paying attention to the big picture of the Winnipeg Jets right now going into May of 2023.
Well, it just felt like, again, and I hate that viewers have to relive this through us right now, but it just felt like it was like, in one breath it was, we're not here for excuses, right? We're not here for, making excuses for injuries and stuff like that. Every team deals with them. Like, was losing Josh Morrissey and Mark Scheifele a sizable, loss? Absolutely. There's absolutely no denying it. But when you start going into the series and how if you only scored on that 4-on-3, like in game 3, and like you start doing those things, like that's stuff that loser organizations do. Like, organizations don't do that. Like, they don't come out and talk about all the excuses. You might be internally lamenting those things, but to air them out publicly, again, like, you got to take a different approach to the fans. You got to be be taking some level of accountability and just to acknowledge, like, I mean, man, like I asked 3 questions yesterday. It was absolutely exhausting. Like, one being, you know, where's the level of, like, where's the standard over here, right? Because they're talking about how, you know, they get to the playoffs 5 out of 6 times. I'll remind that one of those was a play-in round that you didn't get out of. You know, it's just like, look at our playoff record. Well, yeah, but the fact of the matter is it's been 12 years and three, you know, you've won 3 rounds. That's not good enough. And to not acknowledge that, like, to not even set what your standard is, like, I mean, you don't have to, you can say our standard is to compete for the Stanley Cup every year and yada, yada. It's just side talking everything, concrete questions. Like, you know, I don't need to justify my job, you know, like, and that's fair. You don't need to justify it to me. You should be justifying it to the fans. That's what the questions are for. You don't have to justify it to the media. There's fans out there that have absolutely zero trust that Kevin Cheveldayoff will get this team to the next step. And that's his opportunity to you don't have to plead for your job. We know you don't have to plead for your job. You have the safest job in the National Hockey League. That's, you know, abundantly clear. But you should be telling fans, giving fans some kind of hope of how how you want to persevere here and how important it is to get this team back on track, how important it is to the fan base that you're doing, important work and striving to be better and acknowledging that you haven't achieved what you wanted to achieve and that you're going to be doing everything to get to new heights. Well, it may just be talk, and actions are more important. When you're not even talking it, let alone your actions, that's going to create a lot of frustration in the fan base, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, listen, I agree, and there'll always be people, on either side. No matter what they do, they love it. No matter what they do, they hate it. But there is a big middle of folks that they're just looking for a reason to be optimistic going forward. And unfortunately, when your season ends the way that it did, with basically a no-show against a team like Las Vegas and being handled the way they did, and then you look back at this core and look at the way the season ended against Montreal. And frankly, this year, in a lot of ways, is exactly like 2019, except the team wasn't quite as good as that team. Like, that team was a legitimate Stanley Cup contender, was as good as just about any in the National Hockey League, and internally seemed to implode in the second half of that season. Well, what the heck happened between the middle of January and the end of the season here? It sure seemed very similar to what happened in 2019. And then a series in which early on you had some really good things happen against a very quality opponent. And then when the chips were down, playing for your playoff lives, I mean, it was equally as bad as what we just saw last Thursday against Vegas in that game against the St. Louis Blues. And I mean, I guess that's somewhat it's indicting on the players. It's indicting on the core, the team that you've built. And maybe it's hard to kind of acknowledge that publicly. But I can't imagine what it was like for those guys to watch a performance like that having happened multiple times before, when we always talk about, it's easy to go in and play well against a poor team in the regular season or get up for a big divisional game. They say it over and over again. This is about making the playoffs and then how you compete in the playoffs. And I mean, I don't think anything could be more disappointing than a performance like that. And if it was a one-off, okay. But this isn't a one-off right now. And again, he's not going to go out and say, all these guys, let us down or whatever. But an acknowledgement that some things are going to change and they're looking for more of what they're missing, even as simple as that. And stay tuned for the next couple months, because it will be interesting around here. Probably would have gone a long ways to at least buy them a little time, because 42 minutes of just not really saying much, I think, was maybe the worst thing that they could have done right now when it comes to questions that we've been asking for a long time that haven't been answered and now have to be answered. And it still seems like, well, the evaluation is ongoing. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, and it didn't help that the ventilation system was broken at the media center.
That was the funniest part of it all.
It was like you had Kevin Cheveldayoff smiling at certain points, which I'm sure fans, I got some people commenting thinking, what's this guy so happy about? But then it was by the end of it, it was like when we were there for we were there the day before for 5 or 6 hours. I didn't know. I thought it was a sick joke. I thought this was the Jets' last kind of dig at the media, just put us in this sweatbox. But yeah, was definitely not the setting that Kevin Cheveldayoff would have appreciated talking in front of for 40 plus minutes.
I actually felt bad for Chevy, like by the end. And I mean, he got a little testy there with Marat, the don't let the facts line or whatever. But I mean, if you looked at him in the last 5 minutes,
you haven't answered a single question. I was hoping that microphone was in my hand at the time. It would have been. We're talking facts. We haven't heard a single answer today.
But the thing about it was, back to the ventilation of the room. It was so hot. He's got those lights on him, like he's sweating, and then all of a sudden his lip is sweating. I mean, this looked like a hostage video at times. The only thing they were missing was a Sunday edition of the Winnipeg Free Press holding it up like the proof of life, knowing that it's happening. So that was kind of a funny side to it all. But as I said, I mean, he was fielding some very good questions from a number of the media, and I don't know whether I certainly don't think fans or any of us are really any further along in knowing where the direction of the team is, but I kind of think at some point they have to give that direction of the team, whether it is very vague and general, which it probably will be until deals and moves are actually made, but something for people to kind of buy into and get excited about going forward, because I think that is definitely there. I think there's a lot of people that would say, you know what, listen, we think that there could be some significant changes to this organization. We still believe we've got a lot of great players and a lot of great assets, and we're going to do what's best for the team going forward. I mean, I don't think anyone would scoff at that. But as I say, that's why I just kind of feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity for an organization that needs some things like that for all the other things we've talked about away from the hockey operation to get done for next season.
On to your point, and many of us have been saying it, and just stating the obvious really is that we're gonna find out here. You know, we're going to find out by the draft, and the draft is not that far away. We're looking at 2 months away from, you know, the end of June here, and a lot of those decisions need to be made. So while, you know, it's too fresh, too raw right now, I'm sure everyone's going to take a couple weeks off, maybe even a month. But they're going to get down to some serious talks here, because the Jets, you know, Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to have to get some kind of surety from these players on their interest in staying long term, because there's no point in wasting time here. Because if you don't want to be back, if you're not expecting to sign a long-term deal, you can't have any of those players really going into next season. You know, if I was to look into my crystal ball, I could see maybe a little bit of play by the Jets where, you know, whether it's Darren Dreger tweeting out that they plan to run it back, or bring, you know, Pierre-Luc Dubois as their number one centerman of the future, all that kind of stuff. I think you're going to see some of those headlines here in the next coming weeks. And then you know, I don't want to say the inevitable, but what seems like the inevitable, you know, everyone gets moved or everybody eventually kind of ends up in a trade. Then the conversation is, well, we did everything we could, right? We wanted these guys. We didn't want to go into rebuild mode, because I think this franchise is afraid of what a rebuild mode will look like at the box office. And so, you know, I think this is just kind of setting up certainly what has to be a summer of change, because unless these players have a change of heart and want to sign long-term deals, I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't have any other decision but to test the market. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the market is actually a pretty good one, given how few pending unrestricted free agents are set to hit the market. Maybe it is a real good opportunity to swap for players, to retool rather than rebuild. So we'll wait and see what that looks like. But I do think this is a franchise's way of saying, look, we tried everything we possibly could do. We wanted these guys back. They didn't want to commit long term, and therefore we were forced to go in a different direction. And here's where we're at. Yeah, well, I mean, the Dubois situation is sort of, you know, one on its own. I mean, if we believe what's been reported for the last, you know, over a year, you know, I don't really think that, you know, I certainly haven't had anything reported that gives me optimism, and certainly from listening to him on Saturday. No one even said I love being a Jet. You know what I mean? Like, no, you know, like Rick Bowness did. Rick Bowness did. Oh, of course, yeah. No, I'm not. That was it. But like, just like helping these guys out in their PR stuff. Like, you know, like you don't have you could have absolutely no interest in signing long term, but you could just say I love being a Jet. You know, like I love it. Well, their feelings were too hurt from what Bones had to say after the game. I mean, none of them were in a right headspace for it, Jeff. Yeah, no, clearly. So we'll see if their headspace can't get clearer here and the picture get clearer as we figure out this crazy offseason. We keep saying crazy offseason, right? But who knows? You know what I mean? I'm getting people emailing me back or messaging me back.
Well, the craziest thing would be is to not do anything.
Anything's going to change. Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
That would be the craziest of it all.
Well, yeah, that was going to be crazy. That was supposed to be crazy last year with the defense, and it's just what's wild is that and what's wild here is that maybe it was the worst thing. I don't think I don't want to take that stance because I do think the playoffs, as short as they were, brought a lot of energy to the city, brought a lot of passion to a fan base that deserved it. So it's hard to regret the fact that the Winnipeg Jets made the playoffs. But I do think those people who have been saying this before and saying this certainly now, with the benefit of hindsight, of course, that maybe this was the worst thing to happen to the Winnipeg Jets from a philosophical standpoint and where they feel they're at. Because if they didn't make the playoffs this year, they would have been the team that had, it would have been quite literally the worst collapse in NHL history to go from where they were in January to where they were, come spring. And that would have absolutely forced, how could you stand up there? How can you stand up there at the podium if you didn't make the playoffs and not say that sweeping changes aren't coming or something needs to change? So to squeak into the playoffs and then lose in 5 games, well, again, I thought that was a terrific energy for the city, for the fan base. Again, well-deserved for them who have waited years to do a whiteout. And it was spectacular. The fans certainly showed up. But if it didn't create this false confidence, I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't think that.
Well, you know what? I'll listen. I'm with you. I mean, I think it was certainly better to make the playoffs than to suffer that indignity.
Totally.
And for a number of reasons. But I don't think that changes Dubois' situation. I don't think it changes Scheifele's situation. I don't think it changes Wheeler's situation. The only one that maybe it does is Hellebuyck, in that, we heard from him how important it is to compete in the playoffs and to be there. And he talked about how much fun he had, in those games. I mean, listen, as I said earlier, my hopes and confidence level of them being able to keep him is lower today than it was on Friday. But I will say this, if they didn't make the playoffs and we were in your situation talking about what happened at the end, I think that would have even hampered that even more than it did by the way the team went out.
Oh, I don't think I don't disagree. I think you would have had guys who would have had similar media availabilities as last year, where you would have been, Mark Scheifele would have been. But how could you not contemplate your future and not wanting to sign long term if you were labeled the NHL team with the worst collapse in league history? You know what I mean? Nobody wants to be touched. The city doesn't want to be attached to it. The fan base doesn't want to be attached to it. For all those reasons, yeah, absolutely a benefit. But certainly a 5-game series did nothing, I would argue, especially one capped off by the head coach calling out your best players, did absolutely anything to benefit your situation and not. I almost feel like it's just as bad. That was the big takeaway. I thought Rick Bowness's comments were an indictment from the top down. The organization in general. This was a brewing frustration for months and certainly shot down the value of the top-end players, many of which are up for new, potentially new extensions.
Okay, that's a great point. That is a great point, and maybe that is the one reason why Chevy was so.
That's the one reason why Bowness walked back to his comments.
Yeah, well, listen, that was just massaging egos and hurt feelings, ruffled feathers. That's just that was. He said he stood by everything that he said. Maybe he shouldn't have said that he was disgusted. Well, guess what? He was disgusted. There's a lot of people that were disgusted, and he just said it.
Players should have been disgusted.
Well, for sure. And I would imagine there was probably some of that in, Mark Chipman's office and Kevin Cheveldayoff's as well. But again, and I think we all have to acknowledge that they have some major work to be done. They're being forced into it, maybe whether they prefer to do it or not. And having Chevy come out and back Bones and say the same things about those players probably doesn't do him a service when it comes to trying to maximize value of any of those teams that he's playing. I will say this just before we go.
I get a bunch of high fives from the fans, but you're definitely not making your negotiations any easier, for sure.
I was listening to Jimmy Murphy today, talking with Jeff Merrick, and they were talking about the collapse of the Bruins and losing that series the way they did after that incredible season. And of course, I think everyone that watched the end of that game, you saw Bergeron, in his hugging with his teammates and the stunned look after losing. You realize that both he and Krejci very likely might be gone next year. And he started talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois and how great Dubois would look in Boston and how it would be sticking it to Montreal. And you look at a situation like that, and again, the fun part of this, and I know it's not fantasy hockey, but there are trades in the National Hockey League, and it's up to us and fans to kind of speculate on players they'd like to see and come back. That situation in Boston, and you mentioned without the big free agents there, very, very unique opportunity for a team that may very well be dealing two very skilled, very established NHL players to a spot like Boston at a team. And I think a team like Boston probably would feel like if they could get Pierre-Luc Dubois in, make him a key part of a very, very good team, that they might have the opportunity to sign him long-term as opposed to just picking up a guy for one term. And to me, from Cheveldayoff's perspective, wherever he trades those guys, if the deals do get done, the best thing that they can possibly do is trade those players to spots that there might be a possibility of an extension. Scheifele, I think, is wide open. Dubois has been reported about Montreal, but they really do need to get a few other players involved. And, if Montreal really wants him, have to step up a deal to avoid him going somewhere, liking it, and staying there long-term and not showing up in Quebec.
Let's play fantasy hockey here a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's very obvious that Pierre-Luc Dubois would love to have a lasting legacy with the Montreal Canadiens. That's no secret. I've asked him about just what it's like to be from the province and be a francophone and playing for the Montreal Canadiens. And he said it's like he's like, there's not a single person who grew up in this province who didn't, one day dream of playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, that's just the way it works. Right. And so from a cultural perspective, from a hockey perspective, all those things. But I think Pierre-Luc Dubois, as much as he'd love to sign there, I think he just wants to go to a contending team. And so you look at a team like Boston, and he kind of plays that nasty, right? If you're the Boston Bruins, isn't Pierre-Luc Dubois exactly the kind of player that you want in your locker room? And I think because of the leadership group there, I think that's the kind of team that can adopt these so-called problem childs, if you will, players that get reputations, for maybe not pulling the same rug or soaring the same direction as their teammates. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think, would fit well there. Did you not feel like Mark Scheifele, when he was giving kudos to Stevie Yzerman, wasn't saying, hey, reunite me with my buddy Andrew Kopp out in Red Wings? Because the last time I checked, the Red Wings have a lot of money to spend on players.
The irony of that whole quote was that it was asked in the terms of, does he want to stay in Winnipeg and would he sign a contract extension? And he brought up Yzerman as an example of a player that was with one organization for his entire career. But I did sort of, you mentioned that when we were there. I kind of had a bit of a laugh at that too.
But I think when you look at this playoffs, particularly Boston, I could see Boston going after Connor Hellebuyck. I think you need, it's crazy to say that because Allmark's probably going to win Vezina trophy this year, but I think I don't think he's as good a goalie. I think this showed you this playoffs that, two fairly really good goalies aren't as good as a really, really great goalie. I also see the Toronto Maple Leafs one day going after Connor Hellebuyck. They realize they're a goalie away from great success. Whether or not that would happen, who knows? But then you look at Connor Hellebuyck potentially going to Detroit, right? Maybe there's an opportunity there. He would certainly speed up their rebuild. I think there's lots of opportunity. I think there, whether it's through picks or players, there's three really good players on the Winnipeg Jets who still have term. 1 year, not really term, obviously, but they still have this season under a friendly contract. And then if you can do a sign and trade or allow Connor Hellebuyck or any one of these players to speak with other teams to negotiate deals, I think that just ups the value. So we'll see what happens, man. But something's got to give, and the clock's on, because you can't have a lot of these guys with offer sheets potential after the draft and all these other things, especially with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, if he gets into past the draft with no contract yet, offer sheets become a pretty big deal there, especially if for 1 year you give away a lower end price. The Jets either have to force it, even if it's a $6 million, $7 million deal, it's like one first round pick or something in and around that range, kind of forces the Jets to either accept or get rid of it for that. So those moves need to be made early on. And a lot of those moves and just clarity needs to be made early on, so Kevin Cheveldayoff can figure out a plan here and execute it, as he'll be the man, obviously, in the chair.
Yeah, I don't doubt that the work has already begun and it's happening, behind the scenes. I just do think they, back to the Chevy bit yesterday, probably could have given this fan base a little bit more of a bone, or at least a bit of an idea of their vision going forward. That I guess we're going to find out one way or the other over these next little while. Hammer, listen, this has been awesome. I could kick it with you all day long. We'll do this again very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day off, and thanks for taking some time to join us on WST today after the grind that this last couple weeks has been for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for everything you do, Huss. And I'm sure your sponsors, you're getting text messages from your sponsors or Remo saying, we got to go to commercials, guys. You got to butter these guys up. We've been going long, but I always love it. That's my reputation. We go into overtime when I'm on. So
hey, you know what? Good. Listen, you're OT. You show up every visit. And you know what? And you know what? More than anybody that I have on the show, I think that you and I like to push back at each other at times as well. So
we've had our fair share of conversations. We both got opinions to a certain point.
That's what makes
my fault. You're often
great.
Wrong. It's what makes you a great person to debate with. You know what I mean? And you've stumped me a few different times. Fans always let me know that, so that's great. But,
hey, listen, this is what it's all about. Push back the word of the ruffled feathers. We've had malaise. It's 2023, the year of pushback. Here at least on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great one, man. Thanks again for doing this.
Appreciate it, guys. Shout out to the viewers. Take care.
All right, there's our pal Jeff Hamilton. And, man, we still have a little bit more to do here. And we did go way long. But to be honest, that's probably going to happen a few times over the course of this summer. Certainly in the next couple months as we talk about this offseason. Of course, have a lot more exciting things to talk to. Bombers season coming up. Fish starting as well. Sea Bears. And playoffs involving the Winnipeg Ice and the Manitoba Moose. Hey, a big shout out to our friends over at Little Brown Jug. Generic lager just launched. Have you tried it yet? You definitely should. Had a couple at the Osborne Tap House on Friday night. Nice to see Generic on tap at some of the local bars. Just a great beer, impressively standard in the best way. Light and clean to taste with a mellow flavor and crisp finish. Now Manitoba can support local, without having to move away from the domestic taste they've come to expect with a light beer. It's available in 8-packs or by the can through the tap room or through vendors. You can also pick it up at your local Manitoba liquor marts. And as I said, it's showing up in a few local watering holes as well on tap, the new Little Brown Jug Generic Lager. Obviously, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about golf, but I got to give a big shout out to my guy, Tony Finau, who outdueled John Rahm, winning the Mexico Open. It's that 4 wins in, I think, 18 months for the big guy. But the big news locally was Aaron Cockrell once again contending on the DP World Tour, birdied the first 3 holes in the final round to tie for the lead, stumbled going from there, had a couple double bogeys and finished back of the leader group. But, after his second place in Japan the previous week, the baby swag of Aaron Cockrell is helping out right now. And man, he's having a great season, even though the rest of that final round didn't go his way. And of course, the best news here in Winnipeg it was opening day at Breezy on the weekend. Breezy Ben's one of Manitoba's top private clubs with a championship course, top-notch practice facilities, and the best 19th hole around on their beautiful course side patio. Great men's, ladies, and junior programs as well. Great long-term home for your family. Find out more at breezyben.ca or call our pal Corey Johnson for more information about becoming a member. And while we're getting ready for this nice weather in summer, if you're thinking about an incredible world-class fishing getaway just a couple hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the perfect getaway for your friends and family trip or for Manitoba businesses. Quick and easy. You can reward your top customers or organize a very unique team building experience. Find out more online at aikenslake.com. And any university students looking to work in Paradise for the summer and they're looking for a couple more guides and a couple more servers, send a resume into pitt@aikenslake.com. Wow, Remo, I kind of knew with all the work that you did this morning and how much content there was coming out of the weekend that today's show would really just be scratching the surface as we fully dive into the Winnipeg Jets offseason.
You know, there's a lot we didn't get to. We didn't really touch on Pierre-Luc Dubois' comments at all. I know that's something we're going to get to. We didn't go into Cheveldayoff's comments specifically. Like, I don't know how much we want to play those. I know a lot of people are talking about his response to Murat's question. About
it won't be the full 42 minutes, I'll tell you that.
Like, I caught a couple. And like Jeff asked questions as well. 3 playoff series wins. Is that what you're satisfied with? So... we'll have time this week going forward to touch on all that. So great conversation with Jeff. I was going to say, I learned a lot about the press conference. Like the team, they all love each other. They all get along. Blake Wheeler, they removed the C, still a captain, according to Morrissey and Lowry. Getting to the playoffs, really hard. A lot of other teams in the league wish they could be talking about a first-round exit right now. We learned that, and I'm trying to think if there was anything else. And you did mention about players talking about Winnipeg. Nino Niederreiter said he likes Winnipeg and would love to be back.
That was the one guy.
He was the one guy who did say that.
And Nito, it was interesting having him come up there because, again, he's a key player on this club with 1 year left on his contract. And he sort of mentioned, and as I said, we're going to get to these over the next couple days. We'll have plenty of time to rehash anything we heard from particular players. And we'll certainly get into a little bit more from the general manager. But I think where these conversations are going to go to now is more along the lines of what Jeff and I talked about for sort of the last 10 minutes or so. And as I said, I know it's not fantasy hockey, but there's going to be some deals that need to be made and or at least possibilities and options for the Winnipeg Jets. And I think now is the time where we'll spend some time talking maybe with some people in some other markets about, how attractive a Mark Scheifele or a Pierre-Luc Dubois, or as much as I don't want to talk about it, a Connor Hellebuyck might be to other NHL teams and what that might bring in return for the Winnipeg Jets. And I guess before even those deals are made, it's what are the Winnipeg Jets looking to put into their locker room, into their roster? And what type of players, what's missing right now from a group that has a lot of skill, has a lot of talent? What's missing to maybe get more of that pushback that Bones talked about after Game 5? Let's hit up these Coolbet lines for tonight, and just one game in the National Hockey League, but it is Game 7 after last night with those 2 incredible Game 7s, including the OT thriller between the Panthers and the Boston Bruins. The bar's set pretty high. But I'll tell you what, Remo, this should be a good one tonight between the Rangers and Devils. I've been so off on picking all of these games. I'm just riding with the Rangers tonight. I picked them at the start of the series and sooner or later have to get something right. But the Devils, a slight favorite at home, minus 116. Rangers basically even money at minus 101. And this one's gone back and forth. The road team, I think, has won 4 of the 6 games so far. To me, it's a real pick 'em. You got any lean tonight on Rangers Devils?
Well, the road teams keep winning all these games, so maybe go with the road teams. But is it really like a home road thing with Rangers Devils? I picked the Devils in my bracket, where if you go to the WST bracket challenge, I'm actually in 3rd right now, giving myself.
Well, you had Florida in 7. I'm sure that was a big boost for you.
Yeah, I also took the Jets in that one, which was the homer pick. Thankfully, in my home bracket, I did take Vegas, but yeah, I'll go Devils. I think they're the stronger team, although Rangers have the better goalie. So this is, I would say it is as tight as the odds indicate, but I'll go. You can take Rangers. I will take the Devils.
Some good hoops tonight, too. Two more series continue. Well, one gets started, one continues in the NBA. Sixers at Celtics. Doesn't look like Joel Embiid's going to play. Boston's a 9.5-point favorite. And the Phoenix Suns, after getting absolutely boat raced by the Nuggets in game number one, look to get back in the win column. They're 4-point underdogs and plus 148 on the money line for tonight. Right back at it tomorrow for the Winnipeg Ice. The games 3 and 4 in Saskatoon going to be Tuesday and Wednesday, and then a game coming back here next week. And of course, Manitoba Moose off to Milwaukee to play game 3 after that big OT win last night. Cole Mayer tying it up in the final minute, and Jansen Harkins with the winner. If you missed it, check out my Twitter. The Daniel Finks call was phenomenal. In fact, Remo, let's get some good vibes. Can we play that of finishing up the program?
Sure. Well, I got a couple other notes. I have seen people in chat criticizing the Jets players for not wearing team gear. It's the last day. It's locker clean out. No player I've seen in any team with their clean out interviews wears team gear. So I don't think
put it this way. I won't complain about it on the weekend.
Yeah.
But everyone knew it was so bloody obvious up until this season. I mean, frankly, it was embarrassing. I mean, your captain never wore Jets gear. Scheifele was always in his Nike stuff, and that seemed to change. I'm sure there was a couple conversations about that. It wasn't something that I talked about a lot on the program. We did make mention of a couple times just how strange it was, especially for a captain of an NHL team to always be wearing a personal brand. And Blake, to his credit this year, was a Winnipeg Jet when he was speaking with the media. So pretty much all of those. But yeah, for garbage bag day, it's not the same as a game day or other team events. So that's much to do about nothing.
Yeah, and we did see. I don't know. Should I mention this here, Huss? I texted it to you. Mark Mathot had that tweet about the Fairmont. Was the beginning of the season, set everyone off. Bruce Cassidy weighed in, and I feel bad for the Fairmont, but Bruce Cassidy was asked, Jesse Granger tweeting this, was asked what the worst thing he's dealt with on the road in the playoffs. He said the Fairmont in Winnipeg didn't have hot water last week. That was a beautiful hotel, great service, but they were out of hot water. And Cassie is the coach of Vegas now. There's some in chat who thought he was still with Boston, but
Gary told me that, and I will admit, I laughed my ass off. But, credit to them for not making a big deal about it. And maybe Granger knew that and purposely asked. I don't know. It's been Fairmont. I would have never thought the Fairmont would be taking bullets from people from around the National Hockey League. But I guess if the hot water doesn't work and your entire team is staying there will be. Though that's a legitimate complaint. Not like some of the BS we've heard from some other people elsewhere in the league about what this city doesn't have, like an airport or Wi-Fi. But,
I mean, I was going to say,
anyone that's staying at a hotel, if the hot water doesn't work, you're probably going to be a little choked about it.
I mean, obviously they have hot water. I guess the day they were there, it didn't work, and that would be annoying not to be able to get a shower. Maybe they turned off because they wanted to tick off Vegas heading into the game. Didn't work. Unfortunately, didn't work. They did win both games. And I guess, there was the other Jets news during the show, Huss. They did announce the signing of former second-round pick Nikita Chibrikov to an entry-level contract. That was during the show, 3-year ELC. Where was it? They tweeted it out. So we'll see.
Nicely done. And Chibrikov, that was the one thing that we kind of did get out of the out of Kevin Cheveldayoff's availability on Sunday. And Dave Minuk saw Chibrikov in the press box at the game on Friday for the Manitoba Moose. And then it was pretty clear that was in all likelihood happening. But he was the second pick, 50th overall in the 2021 NHL draft. He had better numbers at the junior or kind of 2 league levels. Didn't do a ton this year with Moscow Spartak as a young player, but sometimes it's tough to really compare numbers from the KHL, certainly to North American pro hockey. So as Chevy did say on the weekend, he is signed. I think he didn't say that they were signing, but it was pretty clear why he was here and what he was doing. And I'm not sure whether he'll be hanging around with the Moose on the road just to kind of get a taste of what's happening with the playoffs. I don't believe he'd be eligible to play because obviously he's just signed right now and there's a clear day roster in the American Hockey League. But maybe bringing him in, getting to know some of the players and the coaches that he might play with and get a little bit of a taste firsthand of what Calder Cup playoff action looks like before he comes to camp next year. But there you go. A little bit of good news for the Jets at the end of the day after a pretty rough weekend on a number of levels.
Yeah, the Moose tweeting out that he joins them on a professional tryout. So I'm not sure what that means.
PTO. Well, I mean, listen, at this point, I am not sure whether, they would kind of tweak that lineup or bring someone in that's never played before. But as I said, joining the club, traveling with the team, I'm sure, and meeting some of the other guys in the organization and getting a start to his time here in Winnipeg with the Jets and the Manitoba Moose organization. Well, as I said, speaking of the Moose, I mean, it was a hell of a comeback. This Milwaukee team is so stacked. I was at the game on Friday and I was looking up. That guy played on Nashville. That guy was on Nashville. That guy was on Nashville. It was like half the team we had just seen playing in the NHL against the Winnipeg Jets and looking pretty good down the stretch. But it was Cole Meyer who was the hero that tied the game late in the third period. And then it was Jansen Harkins who, has really stepped up and played at a very high level this year, despite the disappointing nature of his season being sent down to the American Hockey League. But Daniel Fink had he'd been waiting for this one for a while, an OT winner in the playoffs. And this is how it sounded yesterday on moosehockey.com and on 680 CJOB.
Chisholm fires, save, rebound, they score! Jansen Harkins overtime! Winner! And the Moose take this one 3-2!
Well, what a shift from Jansen Harkins. All game he's kind of been in and around it. Now the officials are still...
All right, there you go. What a call by the Fink, and we'll have to get him on in the next couple days before the Moose get at it in game number 3 against the Milwaukee Admirals. Again, tonight, game 7, Rangers and Devils. Tomorrow, 2 new series get going. Winner of this will play Carolina on Wednesday, as will the Oilers in Vegas get going. So tomorrow, I guess, we'll have Dallas and the Seattle Kraken. And, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. We'll hit all that on the Lock Shop tomorrow, as well as on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And, again, the Ice up 2-0, heading to Saskatoon, trying to finish the job against the Blades and move on to the Western Hockey League Championship Series, potentially against Jet prospect Brad Lambert and the Seattle Thunderbirds. Listen, folks, we're just getting started on this Jets offseason. We'll have much more coming out of the weekend tomorrow. Mike McIntyre is going to join us. We'll also have the latest on both the Moose and the Ice. 2 new series in the National Hockey League. You know where to be. Join us at 1 o'clock Central right here, live on YouTube. Thanks to everyone that joined us. Tell a friend about WST and make sure to hit that thumbs up and that red subscribe button before you leave. Have a great night.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home! Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.